It's the anti-checker.
We will return to your scheduled programming shortly, or we are currently experiencing technical difficulty.
Okay, I know that the credits say anti-checker, but this is Rational Roundtable channel. I haven't set up separate credits for the Rational Roundtable channel as of yet. That's something that I'll eventually get around to doing. So much stuff to do. And welcome everybody. I hope that this works. I'm trying to get things set up. I don't know if everything is set up properly, so really this is going to be interesting. I see that there are a few of you here, so that's a good thing. At least some of you have in fact subscribed to this channel. Also, if somebody would be willing, I greatly appreciate it, to try the Streamlabs link to donate like $1. I know it's asking a lot, but I just want to make sure it works because I just set that up with Streamlabs, and since this channel can't be monetized, I want to see if that works. In the meantime, Bradley was first in the house. Bird of Prey says that I'm trying to confuse him by putting on this channel. Very true. Piano Dean says good morning. Hey, Bird of Prey says, I guess I should add this to the website, please, my friend. Darren says not first. Kongu says, hey, dude named Clem says, Dan says, okay, I saw a video on your channel, told me to come here. Excellent. I'm glad that that part at least worked. Alexander says, yay, me too. Iron Wolf says, hey guys. Chris Cook says hello. Not Ryan Johnson says hello out there in YouTube land. And Dan23 says, when clicking the subscriptions button, what's the difference between personalized and all? I have no idea. That must be something new. That comes when you click on subscriptions, it says personalized or all. I'm not sure. Darren says this is the music people hear when they die. Wow. Bradley says you can set what notifications you get, some or all. Ah, gotcha. That makes some sense. Dan says, when it comes to your reading messages only addressed to you in the chat, what is this channel name exactly? And then Bird of Prey did put it in. It is at Rational Roundtable, all one word. Most people, the abbreviation that people used to use when I used this channel before was RRT, but that won't highlight. But yeah. Let's see. Mr. Londell says, actually got notified in time to see the opening credits. Excellent. I was wondering if there was going to get notifications when someone goes live. Yeah, I didn't know that you could do that. So yeah. Kongu says personalizes BS and it gives you like half the videos. All gives you all. Well, then I would probably select all just to be safe if you care about the content on this channel. If not, well, then you got to figure out what to do. Richie Poole says hello. Chris is in the house, says hello. Bradley says mute yourself. You'll get plenty of donations. That's that's true. Okay, and it says God donated $1. Thank you, God. And it says you owe me a dime. All right, and yes, I just heard it on my phone. It did go through. So thank you. That worked. Whoever that was. And Dan23 says, hope that works. So if that was you then, Dan, thank you, my friend. It looks like it worked. Now, I haven't done anything like to customize the donation system, so it shows the little zombie there, which I'm sure those of you that are atheists will find hilarious because of the whole Jesus zombie gag. But for right now, it is working. So thank you, Dan. If anybody wants to make a quote-unquote super chat, you can do so through the Streamlabs, and the same rules for super chats apply on this channel as the other one. You can pick any of the super chat rewards. I know the description's not updated yet, but most of you that do that know the basics of it. Now, funny thing, I kind of wanted to touch on something that I know some people think is controversial within the realm of religious belief in general. This guy that's preaching right behind me, this is the live stream of our 9 o'clock service. This is a guy named Josh Brooker. He is the pastor of a smaller church out in Woodbury, Tennessee, which is owned by our church. I go to the Experience Community Church. Experience opened up kind of a, if you will, a branch church in Woodbury, which is a small town, and Josh is the pastor over there. And Josh is also a good friend. He's a really nice guy, and he and I have hung out many times. But I saw him last night, and he was touching on something which I'm sure you guys have all heard a million times before, but I'm curious to see what some of you guys think about it. And that is the idea that true contentment, true joy, true happiness is fleeting without some kind of relationship with God. And I know that, of course, many atheists strongly disagree with that, where they'll say, well, I'm happy. And most of the argumentation I hear back from the Christian side of things is that, are you really? Or are you just happy in the moment? Because happiness and joy are two very different things. Happiness is is basically an emotional state which is usually brought on by favorable circumstances. So, for example, if somebody puts in a super chat, then that makes me happy because that's a positive thing in my life. That's a good thing and all that. Somebody gives me a nice present. When Mrs. Handchecker makes a nice dinner, those kinds of things will make you happy. But those things will not make you content. Those things will not make you feel a sense of joy in your life. They'll only give you a brief moment of happiness, and I think that's what he's talking about. Now, my question, and this is specifically to my atheist friends out there, because I'm genuinely curious about how you guys feel about this. What, if anything, brings genuine, complete joy to your life? Because it's that other than just having like perfect circumstances in your life all the time. I'm genuinely wondering about that. So if anybody wants to touch on that, that's kind of something that I was just curious about. Otherwise, we'll just stick with what's in the chat. And Peter Quinn just subscribed to the channel. Thank you, Peter. I don't know if you're here right now or which channel you subscribe to. I need to make two different animations, one for Rational Roundtable, one for the Anti-Trekker. Because the Anti-Trekker channel has been growing a little bit, which I'm very excited about. Almost 100 subs in the last week, so very good. We're very close to 9,100 now. And let's see. Just as much as I plan to see Cats. I would love to go see Star Trek on Ice just as much as I plan to go see Cats. Yeah, that Star Trek on Ice, is that really a thing? Because if it is, oh my God. Darren says, it's not exactly a religious topic, but how about that Diablo 4 cinematic? I have not seen it yet. I didn't know they released it. I will definitely check that out. Because now the thing about cinematics, so Blizzard has always made top-notch cutting-edge cinematics. So if the Diablo 4 cinematic is freaking awesome, well, that's to be expected. What I want to see is Diablo 4 gameplay. If that's ultimately, because the cinematics, I absolutely, not only I would expect to be top-notch. If they're not top-notch, I would be incredibly disappointed. Tennessee, dear Bird of Prey says the whole state smells like poop. Yeah, I heard him say that. Well, Bird of Prey obviously is wrong and is just kind of being evil. And Jason Link subscribed. Thank you, Jason. Boy, I'm going to probably get a lot of those because a lot of people are new to the channel, but that's okay. We'll see lots of zombies run by today. With what God says, well, here's the thing. Assuming you are a non-believer, doesn't matter. Because, and I am of the opinion that regardless of what religion you may be, there is only one God, right? And bear with me for just a second, regardless of whether you believe or not, if God exists, then God exists, regardless of if you are a Christian, if you are a Muslim, if you are a Jew, or if you are any particular flavor of one of those religions, or you are one of the various pagan religions, like if you're Hindu or something like that, or even a religion that doesn't invoke a deity like Buddhism. If you are, lots of subscribers coming in. I'm assuming those are people coming over from Anti-Trekker, so welcome all. But is it so it's not a matter of what God. This is not meant to be like one of those gotcha type questions or something like that. I'm just curious as to what brings true joy, true contentment, and all that into someone's life who is a non-believer. And I'm asking you, and it is a genuine curiosity. Thomas is in the house, just woke up. Hey, Thomas, good to see you. Bradley says, I'm assuming when you say that stuff was epic, you're talking about the Diablo 4 cinematic. Looking forward to seeing it. Azine is here. Richie says, contentment comes from within. Within what? And that's not true. Contentment doesn't, contentment can come from a good outlook and good attitude to a certain extent. But, so I'm just curious. Seeing others grow, seeing others happy, being part of a community that adds growth and raising hope. But you see, actually, and no, you don't require God for that. That's true. But again, what you're arguing for is the same thing that I said for happiness. Those are all situational. So if seeing others grow and others happy brings you joy and contentment, that's great. But what about when people aren't growing and aren't happy? What about if you're not part of a community? All right, so that's the point. That's the difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is situationally dependent. Joy is not. And so that's why I'm trying to see what brings joy to someone who is not a believer. Dan23 says, what is your opinion on religious theater shows, stage, musicals? Well, I don't, honestly, as far as film is concerned, because I don't go to religious theater, at least, the closest thing to a religious theater I've ever been to would be when I saw the Book of Mormon, which is, of course, very much not religious. But generally speaking, religious entertainment, the production value sucks. And that's just a fact. Thomas Pot says, you have 9,000 subs on the Anti-Tracker channel and 2,000 here. That's over 10,000. You tell us your name. Except, Thomas, and you know this, that most of those subs are overlapping. So nice try. But no, and the deal was 10,000 on Anti-Tracker, not 10,000 between the two. Rich says, those are not comfortable with themselves. Seek validation elsewhere. Interesting. Well, and the funny thing about that's something that we talk about. Like when you talk about validation, another word for that is identity, right? Where do you find your worth? Where do you find your identity? And that's one thing that's interesting in the modern world, because more and more people that aren't comfortable with themselves, so they seek it in superficial things: their sexuality, their gender, their skin color, what we refer to as identity politics, right? All that is a side effect of people being basically uncomfortable and having to prove themselves worthy by advertising some specific superficial part of themselves, like that makes them important, which it really doesn't. It's superficial. By very definition, it's not important. Darren says, Rational Royalty, I sent you a link on the Diablo 4 cinematic in Skype. Thank you. I will definitely check it out. Mr. Londell says, Star Trek on Ice disturbing. Yes, that sounds as bad as the Wrath of Khan. I don't remember if it was on ice or just an opera that they did on Robot Chicken. Piano Dean says, Rational Roundtable, my life is most joyful when I'm debt-free. Working my tail off to get back there doing Dave Ramsey's debt snowball. Well, I'll tell you, Dave Ramsey does have a good debt program. And being debt-free is definitely a good thing. But I would argue that, like the other stuff that I was saying, Piano Dean, that is situational. What if you're not debt-free? Does that take away your joy? Does that rob you of your happiness? And if so, then that's a problem. Gene says, hi, how you doing, my friend? Sci-Fi Nation says, Anti-Tracker, that was my other username. Ah, yes, I do remember that. Thank you, Jason. Aberjam says, good morning, sir. Does your church have a YouTube channel or website? I'd like to check out the sermons. They do. However, that won't be necessary, Aberjam, if you don't want to cloud your subscriptions, because those sermons are actually going to start appearing on this channel. And so, which I already got permission from the senior staff over at the Experience to do so. So those sermons will, in fact, be available. I'm going to start posting them this coming week, and so you'll be able to get, and trust me, some of them are real doozies. Enter, I'm not seeing any wrenches in here. Virgin territory. That is true. I have not actually set up any wrenches as of yet on this channel. Well, I did have a couple, but I deleted them because they were outdated. Like there was one for a good friend of mine named Tim, who used to do a show with me on this channel, but I haven't talked to Tim in about a year. Losoyo, which is the old username for Lore Reloaded, had a wrench on the channel, but yeah. And I cannot pronounce that name of yours for the life of me. Is that how do you pronounce your name? Mastikna Akita. I don't know how you say that. I utterly respect your point, so I appreciate that. But I'm just curious as far as, because since you were the first to kind of stand up and say a couple things, it's one of those things. When I talk about these subjects, I want to dig past the hyperbole. I want to dig past the insults and all that and really get to how people feel, because that's how we get to an understanding, and that's how we ultimately, in my opinion, get closer to the truth, is if we're genuinely seeking information from the other person rather than seeking to win a fight, if that makes sense. Mr. Miles is in the house, says first. How you doing, Mr. Miles? I think that as long as people have a reason, a cause, a goal, a light to follow, it's all okay. I see, but that's the problem is, what if you don't have those things? That's where the situational problem comes into play, and that's what Josh was talking about during his sermon last night, and I assume he's talking about right now, is if there's, whenever you say, when X circumstance happens, that's good. That may be true. And that should bring you happiness. That should make you happy that those things are happening. But that doesn't give you a sense of joy or contentment in your life, because those things can be taken away. Steve says, Christians, stop telling atheists why they are atheists, because most of the time we have no idea what we are talking about. I'm speaking as a Christian with honest doubts, even atheists at times. Well, I'm not sure why you say that, Steve, because I'm not telling atheists why they're atheists. I was an atheist for several years back when I was fairly young, in my 20s. I was not just an atheist. I was a staunch anti-theist, meaning that I had not only would say that I didn't believe in God, or as some atheists like to say nowadays, lack a belief in God, but I actively felt that theism was dangerous, theism was evil, theism was destructive, etc. Mr. Miles says, I came in here you asking what can bring an atheist joy and contentment. I have told you several times what brings me joy. Well, Mr. Miles, you are one person. I'm talking to the crowd. People could make great religious movies, if they want to work for it. The problem, and this is actually, I think, a real problem as far as Christian entertainment, and it's not that they don't want to work for it, it's that they don't understand the work involved. Far too often, basically what happens is Christians feel that, hey, the message is so important that, we don't need the $10 million for visual effects. We don't need to spend $500,000 to get a decent director of photography. We don't need to spend a couple of $1 million for real script writers. We don't need to spend that money because the message is so important. The message is so positive that it doesn't matter. God is going to bless this and blah, 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 blah. And they end up making an inferior product. And while it's true that some people may enjoy it, some people may, in fact, absolutely love it, but it doesn't change the fact that it is an inferior product and that it doesn't reach the crowd that they want to reach. Because here's the thing. Good entertainment can be Christian-based. It can be, secular-based. And most of it is secular-based, of course. But it needs to be good entertainment. It needs to be well written, well structured, an interesting story, interesting characters. And the problem is that with Christian entertainment, they generally think that the Christian message supersedes everything else, every other aspect of it, and therefore they don't have to focus on it. So I don't think it's so much that they're unwilling to work at it, or if they it's just that they don't think it's necessary. Thomas says, hey, Trey, your packages arrived. Too bad the post office can't set up a way to deliver stuff to people homes from a P.O. box. Yeah, that would be nice. You probably can, but, it'll cost money. However, I will go by. I have an appointment tomorrow morning for some physical therapy, so I'll go by after that. Hopefully, I'll be able to get it then. Well, a scientist said that every person will once in their life say, oh, God, or oh, my God, or something along those lines. Well, okay. I'm sure everybody does at some point, but that doesn't necessarily make them theists or anything. Gene says, but tell about your name. Something with pet and stuff, right? Something with pet and stuff? About my name? Like Rational Roundtable or Anti-Tracker or what? I'm not sure what you mean, Gene. I know the meaning of Anti-Tracker name is because he hates first contact. Oh, Mr. Miles, you better be quiet. And some seek identity through their religion. That is actually true, Richie. That is actually very true, and that's something that Corey has talked about. That's a dangerous thing. And you are absolutely right. But you should seek your identity in God Himself, not at least from the Christian perspective. You should be seeking your identity, your validation, and everything in God Himself, but not in your religion, right? Not in being a Methodist or a Baptist or whatever. Steve says, I have faith and I am a Christian, yet so many Christians tell me that I cannot be a Christian because I'm honest about my doubts. I reject that way of thinking as Christ is my Savior. Well, here's the thing about that, Steve. And I understand what you're saying. There are people that will argue that, if you don't have enough faith, right? Meaning that you have doubts. Well, if you don't have doubts, then quite frankly, I don't know that you can have faith. And so, but yeah, you know what, there is no person who doesn't have doubts about their own beliefs. And it doesn't matter, regardless if you're talking about being a Christian or any other set of beliefs, there are always, at some point in your life, you're going to always have doubts about whatever your core beliefs are. And that's perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal to think about the fact that, wow, it is, I'm sitting here believing in something that I can't prove, that I can't demonstrate. Am I freaking nuts, right? So, yes, if you have genuine doubts, then that just means that you're being intellectually honest. For people that say that they don't, what they're trying to do is basically brainwash themselves into ignoring those doubts. And that is very dangerous as far as from a theological perspective. Because if you sit there and you deny any and all doubt, and you won't confront it, you just absolutely pretend that you have no doubts whatsoever. If something big happens, it crushes your faith. Because, those people walk around and say, oh, well, God's taking care of me, God's taking care of my finances and God's blessing me and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, something horrible happens. A relative dies. There's a tragedy and, they lose everything they own. They get sued and lose. They hurt themselves. Whatever it may be, whatever it is hits them and it crushes their faith because all of a sudden they got a real dose of life. And the funny thing about that is, if you read the Bible predicts that kind of stuff. The Bible says that, yes, you're going to have bad things. Being a Christian is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. It doesn't mean that your life is going to be freaking awesome all the time. And those Christians that act like it does are delusional and are also basically setting themselves up for ultimate failure. Mr. Miles says, life is situational. Well, life is, but joy is not. That's the point. So I am going to just do the stuff addressed to me for a little bit because I am falling so far behind. Darth Revan says, why here? Well, honestly, because of the simple fact that the the algorithm. That's really all it is. The reason I'm on this channel and not over at Anti-Trekker is because I'm sick and tired of the Anti-Trekker channel taking hits from YouTube for being hate speech or just or whatever, because I'm willing to talk about topics that Google doesn't like. And here I'm going to be completely uncensored when it comes to that. And so I'm betting that this channel will never be monetized, quite frankly. So that's kind of my thought on it. Mr. Miles says, wrench me. I'm an atheist. Done. And Darth Revan says, I can be a wrench. Can you now? Well, find out. Romeo and Juliet would be quite a treat in Klingon. You know, that would be. Tom says, just realized Anti-Trekker doesn't work. I'm sure you had most subs on here before we came. I'm just realized that at Anti-Trekker doesn't work. Oh, yeah. Yes, Thomas. You got to do at Rational Roundtable on this channel. All right. And I see a couple of people put at Anti-Trekker in there. Please remember, that does not highlight on this channel. You got to put at Rational Roundtable. So I see Wesley said, greetings, everyone, and put at Anti-Trekker. But yeah, not going to work. Neo Normie also put at Anti-Trekker. What about those who just can't believe? As I spent 17 years as a seeker trying to believe, but I found nothing. Also, the best Christian movie is The Exorcist 3 Legion. Well, I wouldn't call the Exorcist movies Christian films. They're not produced by any church. They're not particularly theologically sound. And that's kind of what I look for if in a Christian film. The story can be on just about any topic, but if the subject of God comes up, it needs to be theologically sound. And The Exorcist really has some serious problems, but they're great movies. Anyway, but as far as you can't believe, and because you've spent 17 years as a seeker, here's the funny thing about that, Neo Normie. Keep on seeking. That's ultimate. This is something that people don't understand about. If you really read the Bible and you really look at what God is after, more than anything else, he wants you seeking. You should be seeking the truth. And if you don't believe because of a genuine sense that you haven't seen enough to believe, guess what? That is not a damnable offense. If you think about it, one of the 12 disciples did not believe that Christ returned from the dead until Christ held up his hand and let him stick his finger in the wound from his hand. All right? So don't think that if you're seeking the truth, but you haven't found it, that's something that automatically condemns you. That's very different than people, and you know what I'm talking about here, Neo Normie, as opposed to people that say, F you to the concept of God or Christianity or whatever. That's different, all right? Seeking the truth is different than putting down a group of people because you think that they may not have the truth. Would anyone religious like dinosaurs or the evolution of men? I'm not sure what you mean. Why would anyone like dinosaurs or the evolution of man? What do you mean by that? I have no problem with the existence of dinosaurs or the evolution of man. So I'm not sure what you mean. Darren says, talking about Christian films being often inferior products, I'm reminded of the Coen brothers film Hail Caesar, which is about a prestige picture of the same name. I never saw Hail Caesar. I know a lot of people talked about how awesome it was. I never saw it, but I don't really go for Oscar bait films generally. Darth Raven says, I'm a Catholic who's angry at the power structure. Well, I can certainly understand that. And there's nothing wrong with being angry about certain things as long as you don't let that anger morph into a bigotry or hatred of something. If you see an injustice in the way your church is doing things, and granted, if you're a Catholic and you see some of the problems in the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being angry about that. But then you need to take that anger and do something productive with it. Gene says, you tell a story, I think, your dog, and name Anti-Trekker on live stream, not your own live stream, I think. Well, Anti, the dog, I've talked about a few times. I'm not sure what you're getting at, though, Gene. All right, so Darth says, did you get new glasses? Not exactly. I just can't catch a break. My glasses, I got up this morning and the little screw that holds the lenses in on my glasses fell out and I can't find it. So these are an old pair of glasses. They're not, I can't see as well as normal because I'm wearing these, but fortunately I had them lying around. So yeah, it's not that these are old glasses, but they're kind of a backup pair more than anything else. Um, And let's see, all of a sudden the chat jumped. Commander Iron Wolf, honestly, I just can't forgive Christians for the fall of Rome. Well, you got problems then, Iron Wolf. Mr. Miles says, how is joy not situational? Ah, good question. And now Mr. Miles is going to ban everyone because he is the first official wrench on this channel. Mr. Captain says, Rational Rant 1, congratulations to seeing the light and wrenching Miles. Number 2, you need to change the tip jar for this channel. Yeah, I know. I need to come up with something different for this channel. And I'll probably just get rid of the tip jar because when I'm doing Rational Roundtable, because it's, just it doesn't fit the motif. But Bird of Prey updated the website. Thank you, my friend. Darth Revan says, I can ask you a weird question. What's your opinion on the super happy Christians? They smell fake. Well, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier, Darth Revan. If a Christian like that, when those types of Christians, so there's a couple of different flavors of when you talk about quote unquote super happy Christians, right? Some have just genuinely never had a major problem in their life. And I am envious of those people because my life has sucked for the most part. And so it's one of those things that if you just think, oh, God blesses everything and this is awesome and life is great, but then and then things and you never have a problem and you're just full of happiness all the time. Great. Those people are genuinely, they're mostly happy, but they've never experienced a real test of their faith. Now, some people would argue, well, maybe they haven't experienced a test of their faith because they couldn't handle it if they did, or maybe they're deluding themselves. It's hard to say which until something bad happens in their life. Then there are others that genuinely just put on a face because they're faking it, right? They're not really all that genuine, and they're just doing it because that's what's expected of those. Those people are hypocrites, and they need to be very, very careful. Now, Aberjam asked me to go back and read the last quote. You misspelled Rational Roundtable. That's why that one didn't highlight. I think it's possible to live without doubts of the existence of God. The apostles did. Many Christians have doubts in other aspects of their life, though. Well, here's the thing. You're right. It's possible to live your life without the doubt of the existence of God. However, you would still have, for example, are you 100% certain on every interpretation of every theological point, every doctrinal issue, every line of scripture? Are you 100% certain that you have all of that right? Because if you are, you're deluding yourself. There is no one, and I mean no one on this planet, no pastor, no priest, no rabbi, no layperson, no one who is 100% correct on all matters of theology. Unless God doesn't exist, in which case the atheists are 100% right. But assuming God exists, nobody understands God 100%. And it's not even possible to understand God 100%. That's kind of part of the point. Trek Reviewers in the house says, hey, how you doing? I just read your last comment. Mr. Miles says, does Dogma count as a Christian film? No, it does not. Resolute says, still can't get used to the name. It makes me think of pizza. Oh, yeah, the old round table pizza. Yes. Darth Raven was, have you seen Good Omens? Is that a movie, or are you asking me if I literally see good omens in my life? Because I don't do omens. So, yeah. Let's see. Why can't I ban Darth Raven? It won't work. I've been treated. Well, because he's also a wrench, probably. Mr. Cat says, can we discuss the Kuroga religion? Like, what is it and how do they practice it? Well, not a lot is known about the Kuroga religion. From footage that has been smuggled out of the nation of Kuroga, we do know that it is in some ways quite similar to the ancient Egyptian ideas that the leader, in Egypt was, of course, Pharaoh. In Kuroga, it is Bird of Prey, is in fact a walking God, which is, of course, a false belief. And the Kurogans do various forms of sacrifice where they will take like their firstborn child and sacrifice it, and their god king bird of prey will eat the child on an altar. It's kind of disgusting when you look at it, but that's what they do. It's a very, very bloody pagan religion. And however you say your name again, and I'm sorry, how do you say that name? Roundtable, I wonder how many Christians dare to make movies about really nasty things like war, surviving in war, and seeing all the terrible things that come with that. Well, that's the thing. I would love to see that. I would absolutely love to see good Christian filmmaking dealing with hard issues. And that's one thing, like the reason I go to this church, I brag about this church a lot, but there's a reason for it. I have been searching for a good church my whole life. I have walked away from more churches than I can care to count. This church is the first church I've ever attended that deals with the hard issues head on, that doesn't cherry pick scripture. What we do, we actually have a systematic way as far as the weekly message that they give at the church, is they start in a book of the Bible. Ray, you're currently working on Ecclesiastes, and each week 100% of one chapter of that is read, and the preacher gives a in-depth commentary on. And so when we start a book, week 1, Ecclesiastes 1, week 2, Ecclesiastes 2, etc. Now, sometimes if the chapter is too big, they'll split a chapter into 2 weeks. But the idea is we skip nothing, all right? We skip nothing, and we do not avoid tough situations, right? We don't avoid talking about hard things like, how do you deal with politics, right? And one thing I appreciate about my pastor is he's gone up there on the pulpit and said, you know what, you guys call yourselves Christians. I've seen the crap you're posting on Facebook. I've seen all those, those orange man bad things against Donald Trump, or those brown man bad things about Barack Obama. Doesn't matter which, right? If you're attacking your president or former president online, guess what? That is antithetical to the teachings of Christ. And so, and so he actually likes to take on, well, I don't think he likes to, but he does take on those things, which I really appreciate. However, I would like to see a genuine Christian filmmaker deal with some of those tough issues. That's, I'll be honest with you, even though it was not a Christian movie, and in fact, even in the realm of this movie, it was actually a pro-Muslim thing, not a pro-Christian thing, but I really liked it, was in the movie Pitch Black, when Vin Diesel's character, and if you haven't seen Pitch Black, is probably, in my opinion, Vin Diesel's best film. He was really born to play that particular part. Unfortunately, they ruined the character of Riddick in the future films, but in Pitch Black, he was he was a jerk, he was a criminal, he was a murderer, he was what the people needed to survive. And at one point, there's also in the cast, there is a Muslim who's on a pilgrimage to Mecca. And these weird alien creatures are killing people left and right. Things are going horrible. And about midway through the movie, when they're dealing with these monsters, Vin Diesel looks at him and goes, "Where's your God?" And as this sarcastic comment. And of course, actually, it's funny because I remember when I saw it in the theater, there was a friend of mine who I knew was an atheist that was there, and he was like, "Yeah," So, but then later on in the movie, the Muslim and this one other person are trapped in a cave. It looks hopeless, and Vin Diesel's character comes back and helps them get to the ship to escape. And as soon as he pulls the rock back to get them out of the cave, he looks at him and he says, "There's my God." That was a freaking powerful moment. That was a great theological moment. Unfortunately, Hollywood misses out on opportunities like that a lot. Vile says, Trekker, because if you take the Bible literally, evolution cannot be true. Wrong answer, Vile. Because here's the problem. First of all, nobody takes the Bible completely literally. That's not possible. And in fact, nobody takes any great work of writing completely literally. Even a historical text, you cannot take completely literally, because there are things in all historical texts that are figures of speech or metaphors or such. Like, for example, in the Bible, Christ himself says, I am the door. It doesn't mean that he is literally a door, right? It means that that through him you can get to where he's trying to get you. That being said, what you should be saying is you cannot take the first 2 chapters of Genesis literally and also agree with evolution. But even that is not 100% true. And so there are, in fact, if you look at the first 2 chapters of Genesis, which is where most people have this whole creation evolution thing problem. First chapter of Genesis, which is the one that people love to cite because that is the creation week, right? On the first day, on the second day, on the third day, on the fourth day, on the fifth day, on the sixth day, and then God rested. In that story, first of all, there's nothing in that sequence that's incompatible with evolution except for the idea of the days. That, wait a minute, evolution take millions, if not billions of years, while this is saying 1 week. That's the big problem. Except that the term that's used when it says day in that sequence is a term called yom. Yom is a Hebrew word that means a period of time. Now, it can be interpreted as a day. However, and it's kind of funny because it's similar to the word day as far as its multiple uses. So it can mean a day, meaning a 24-hour period. It can mean a day as in the hours of daylight. For example, during the day, right, as opposed to at night. But it can also mean an extended period of time, like an age. For example, the day of the dinosaur. When we say the day of the dinosaur, we're obviously not referring to one 24-hour period in which dinosaurs existed, right? We're talking about an entire epoch of time. So the term yom can be and is used to describe day in the similar way that I just did 3 ways, where you can refer to the daylight hours, a 24-hour cycle, or an extended period of time marking a historical event. And so, number 1, that's a possibility. Now, I understand that some people say, well, you're just splitting hairs. Well, the other thing about it is that if you look at Genesis 1 and 2, well, Genesis 1 in particular, is written in a poetic form. It rhymes, it has stanzas, it is almost like a song. And the point of Genesis, those first couple of chapters of Genesis at the very least, the point of Genesis is not to say that the world was created in 1 week. The point of Genesis is to show the relative position of God, of man, and of the earth. And regardless of whether or not you interpret it literally, or you think that it's some protracted period of time, or you think that the whole thing is a parable, is irrelevant. The message is the same. It's like, for example, if you talk about the book Moby Dick. Now, in Moby Dick, Captain Ahab tries to kill a giant white whale. Was that literally true? No. But is the message of Moby Dick true, meaning the destructive force of obsession? Absolutely. And so if you take the parable approach, you think of it like Moby Dick, where it's trying to teach you a lesson, not necessarily trying to teach you history. However, even from a literal interpretation, if you look at the word yom and other parts of the other words that are in Genesis, it doesn't necessarily conflict with the idea of evolution. Now, then when you get to the Garden of Eden, which is Genesis chapter 2, people say, but you see, God made Adam, and then he made Eve, and we all know that humanity evolved independently of the rest of, or independently alongside the rest of life on this planet, that we have a common ancestry with various apes, etc. And there's nothing about the story of Adam and Eve that is necessarily contradictory to that. Now, people will say, well, wait, Anti-Trekker, you're freaking nuts, right? All you have to do is understand, for example, at the end of, so Adam and Eve, Adam was created to be God's personal gardener. Eve was created to be his perfect mate. And then the two of them screwed up. They got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. They had a couple of kids. One of their kids, Cain, murdered their other kid, Abel. And then Cain was shamed by God and left the area of Eden, where he moved to Nod, and he took a wife. Where did the people of Nod come from? Oh, wait, maybe, just maybe, people, humanity had evolved on the earth, but Adam and Eve were a special case. If you want to take the story of the Garden of Eden quite literally, Adam and Eve were created for a special task. However, that doesn't change the fact that humanity had evolved outside of the Garden of Eden. Hope that makes a certain amount of sense. But let us move on. I spent too much time on that, and the chat is going crazy. Where? Hold on, sorry about that. Man, when putting one, do not poke yourself in. Man, oh man, sorry. The chat. I'm way behind on the chat, and I apologize that it jumped on me. So I'm trying to catch up. All right, so after all, isn't bad times that a show of strength of mind and soul? Yes, how you deal with difficulty and adversity is very much a test of your strength of mind and soul and your faith. And people that their faith isn't tested, well, their faith is weak. Bird of Prey says, use some Scotch tape to keep your glasses together like a true nerd. I actually considered that, but I didn't have any Scotch tape. I actually have some duct tape that I almost tried to do, but then found these, so good. Take the screw from and then replace it later. Well, yeah, I'm going to get one of those little glasses repair kits at the store either today or tomorrow. Darren says, a Blu-ray of Hell Caesar is now on its way to you. I expect you to watch it sometime before 2022. I promise you I will. Mr. Miles says, replace the tip jar with the collections plate. That's not a bad idea, Miles. I may do that. That's absolutely a great idea. If you wrench Miles, the end is nigh. Yes, well, it's true. When putting your glasses on, do not poke yourself in the eye. Yeah, I got to remember that. Shared new channel on Discord. Thank you, Darth. I appreciate that. Sci-Fi Nation says, getting a kick out of watching reactions to your old vids on this channel by others, especially the 30-second Homeland Security clip. Oh, yeah, I remember that one. That was real, by the way, where Homeland Security actually roughed me up a little bit and everything because I created a fuss over people at the Social Security office treating my daughter like crap. Darth Raven says, is Amazon TV series An Angel and Demon Are Friends based on a book by Terry Pratchett? I know the show you're talking about, the one that has, what's his name, from Doctor Who. Now I'm forgetting his name, but I saw the first episode. It was cute. Obviously not very good theology, but it was cute. Bird of Prey says, that has something about Mary hair. Okay. If Bird of Prey considers himself a god, does he consider Frank Sinatra a super god? Good question. You'd have to ask him. Average says, you are correct about no one having biblical doctrine 100% right, but knowing that something exists does require 100% understanding of its nature. No, it doesn't. Do you know 100% about the nature of the universe? The answer is no, nobody does. However, I'm pretty sure you know the universe exists. Darren says, Rational Rancher, I was rather disappointed when I found out that the recent Samson film downplays his, fleshy desires into me being merely flirtatious. Yes, and that is a problem. See, with Christian, I know I didn't see the Samson film. I know there was a Christian movie that came out earlier this year about Samson. An interesting character from the Bible, actually. But yes, that should be an R-rated film. There should be nudity. There should be sex. And, of course, Christian film producers, oh, no, we can't do that. You know what? Read the frickin' Bible. The Bible would be fricking X-rated if you made it accurately. There is a book of the Bible that is straight up erotic. That book is called The Song of Solomon. I highly recommend any of my married friends read it, and read it well. Let's see. Wesley says, what about death? What does your church say about death? Everybody dies. 100% of people will die. Aberjam says, does not require 100% knowledge. Previous comment. Okay. Let's see. You could argue that even with 100% understanding, you still can't be sure we might all be a hologram. Well, yeah, we could all be brains in jars, right? Connected to the Matrix. Mr. Londell says, Rational Roundtable, I think you'll be hard-pressed to find the caliber director, writer, and producer to do a Christian-based movie the justice it deserves. I think you're right, and the problem is that because most people that really want to get into entertainment, you have two basic groups of people, right? You have people within Christendom that want to make Christian movies. Like I know the people at I can't remember the name of that stupid company that makes all the Christian movies, like May God Is Not Dead and crap like that. They genuinely want to make good movies, but what they don't want to do is go to Hollywood and learn how Hollywood makes movies. Instead, they'd rather just say, oh, God will help me make a good movie, and they make a crap movie. So, yeah. Miles says, I see, Miles, you switched accounts. You don't like having that wrench? I'll take the wrench away if you don't want it. Says, I have to correct you. Vin Diesel was born for the role of Groot. Well, that is true. I do really like Vin Diesel as Groot. He was on a pilgrimage to New Mecca, not Mecca. That's true, Vile, but I was trying to get pedantic about it. Sci-Fi says, it's so un-Christian to call out a politician regardless of party or race or for bad policies that hurt our home planet and other humans. No! Here's the thing. If you want, and this is the point that Corey was making when he talks about that, it's perfectly fine if you want to say, Donald Trump says that we should build a wall between the United States and Mexico. I disagree with that policy. I think that it will make the immigration situation go from bad to worse. And the reason I think that is X, Y, and Z and go on and on and on, right? That's perfectly okay. What's not okay is people saying Donald Trump is evil. Hey, let's post pictures of Donald Trump with devil horns and 666 and crap like that, right? Let's post all these pictures. Remember the old pictures that people thought were racist of Barack Obama next to a chimpanzee, even though that people did the same thing with George W. Bush back before him? You know, all that kind of stuff, that's what he's talking about. Hateful, insulting, spiteful comments about our politicians is different than disagreeing over policy, if that makes sense. Dan says, what is your favorite religious painting? That's a tough one, but because honestly, very few religious paintings, I can't even really think of too many, very few of them are, shall we say, theologically sound. Like when you see the way that God, the devil, etc. are portrayed, it's not theologically accurate, but some of them have some very beautiful intent and meaning behind them. I really like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. I mean, I know it's a little more than just a painting, but yeah. Darren says, I have a tendency to take the Bible literally in the sense that it means what it says. Right, but meaning what it says can mean different things, right? So, for example, if, when I talked about the creation week, well, whether you think that creation week was actually 1 billion years or 7 days, either way you could say it means what it says. And even if it's a parable, it still means what it says from a viewpoint of the lesson it's trying to teach you. It just may not mean a literal event. Darth Vader says, Hollywood hates Christianity. Well, sadly, for the most part, that is in fact true. Darth Maul says, I have a person of Facebook who wishes Trump would have a severe stroke and did not die, but be in a persistent vegetative state. I don't believe in my life I've seen such hate. Well, that's why that's why I'm not on Facebook anymore. I've completely given up on Facebook. Facebook is a complete cesspool of hate. And it's funny because, of course, Google will no doubt flag this channel as being hate speech because I am not ashamed to proclaim that I'm a Christian, which is a load of crap, right? People can be Christians and not be hate. People can be atheists and not be full of hate. There's a difference between being hateful and holding an ideological perspective on things or holding a theological perspective on things. But Google doesn't understand that. They say Christian bad and therefore you're hate speech, right? Just like if you're anything right of what they consider a sound political doctrine, your hate speech. So F you, Google. You need to get your acts together as far as that's concerned. I really hope the government does break you up because I want to see your company utterly destroyed, even if that means that now I'm going to have to work harder to try and make a living. But that's why I gave up Facebook. I can't stand the hate. I'm done with it. I don't have time for hate. Sci-Fi Nation says, people take on-screen yerk very literally. I'm not sure what you mean. And those who don't are often called bad names and laughed at and chastised. Yeah, but I'm not sure on-screen something very literal. I'm not sure what you mean there, Sci-Fi. Have you been to a creationist museum lately? If you come to South Dakota, we have a small one. I've been kicked out many times. Well, here's the thing. Why were you kicked out? Were you sitting there saying, ha ha ha, that's not true, you're stupid? In which case, yeah, they should kick you out because you're being disrespectful. If you go to you know what? I've never been to a creationist museum. You know why? I'm not a freaking creationist, okay? If you want to go to a creationist museum, that's perfectly fine. But you know what? Just like you don't go to the freaking Louvre and talk about what a hack Leonardo da Vinci is, right? You don't go to the creationist museum and laugh it up about how they're wrong about everything. Be respectful. And before you start saying respect has to be earned, well, then you don't understand what respect is. No, it doesn't need to be earned. And in fact, a person, in my humble opinion, the hallmark of a good person, of a person that wants to have a genuine debate, is someone that offers respect unless they are disrespected. Not a person who says you have to respect me for me to respect you. That's not respect. Okay, that's quid pro quo. If you want, I offer respect to people unless they heavily disrespect me. And even then, it takes a lot. Darth Revan says, who said it was our days could be heavenly days? I don't know. Don't know that particular saying. Yo says, no super chat, off topic, just came home from Dark Fate, not worth the money or time, and I am one of those who like Discovery. Well, thank you, Yosef, I appreciate that. And by the way, if you want to super chat, there is a link in the description below for Streamlabs. That is the only way to super chat on this channel because of the fact that this channel cannot be monetized and likely will never be able to be monetized because I'm willing to talk about politics and religion and stuff like that. Neo Normie says, what about the removed passages like Lilith and the Book of Enoch? Well, those aren't religious passages that were removed. Those are whole books that were not canonized, and there's a difference. As far as the Jewish folklore of Lilith, I don't know that much about it. I think that, is it really all that relevant? Some people think it is, some people think it isn't. Personally, I don't think it is because, quite frankly, I don't think your salvation rests on whether or not you believe Lilith existed. And my understanding is that Lilith was a part of folklore, never a part of canonized religion. Like the Jews never took Lilith seriously. She was a story. But I don't know. Dan says, one day on Mercury seems to last two Mercurian years. Okay, not sure what the point of that is, but yes. And there goes the chat again, going crazy. Captain Ahab was trying to kill a white whale, which symbolizes God's penis. He was trying to castrate God. Moby went white back when Melville wrote it, and then Dick, well, Darren, that's horrible. Trek95 says, sorry I'm late, no notification. That's all right, Trek95. Welcome, my friend. And true rational roundtable, there is a reason there is Sunday Bible school for kids, and those leave out the more R-rated parts. Right, but the problem is that most Christians leave out the R-rated parts completely and the X-rated parts and all that. Like I said, read the freaking, if you haven't read it, read the freaking Song of Solomon. Now, granted, it's written in a style and language that is, thousands of years old. So you might, it's not going to say, and then I whipped out my 8-inch love sausage or something. But it is an incredibly erotic book. And the entire book is about what many Christians, including myself, believe is God's greatest gift to humanity, which is sex. And guess what? God is not a prude. But that doesn't mean that there, and we can get into that whole topic, but I still, that's people that think, oh, God hates sex. Wrong answer. Read Song of Solomon. Darth says they should do a movie on the flat earth was real, might be a laugh. Well, here's the thing. If somebody that was a flat earther wanted to make a movie trying to depict a flat earth reality and did it well, if it's a good movie, I'll watch it. Alexander is in the house, says, what is your statement about Black Plague? Do you like Black Plague? Why would I like Black Plague, Alexander? That makes no sense. And yes, Viles, Pure Flix, thank you. I couldn't remember the name of that company. But Alexander, why are you asking me what my opinion of Black Plague is and if I like it? I don't think anybody likes Black Plague. But yeah. Let's see. Dan says, is there something we don't need? Is this something we don't need? The Matrix 4's release date has not been announced yet, but shouldn't be too far off. Production on the film is expected to begin in early 2020. Yeah, that is something we don't need. I really don't need a Matrix 4. I think that, first of all, Matrix 3 ended the story, and say what you want. Everybody knows that the Matrix films, the first one was a classic. The next two, they were fun action movies, but we don't need another freaking Matrix film. And I just realized an ad up on this. Should we deport illegals? Paid for by the Trump Committee. Political ads on a church stream, of course. Let's see. Aberjam says, to clarify, my original statement was that you need 100% understanding of something to know it exists. That was a typo. You do not need. Okay. So we agree then. Gotcha, Aberjam. Thank you for clarifying. Bird of Prey says, the captain that lost the ship in the trouble with Edward is possibly part of the reason women weren't allowed to be captain a few years later. Thoughts? That would be awful sexist of Starfleet to figure that just because the captain that lost that ship was a woman, that women shouldn't be captains. Because what about Georgiou? Was she a bad captain? Maybe Georgiou is the ultimate reason, because, since nobody realizes that she's from the mirror universe, if she tries to take over the Federation, then they'll say, oh, it's because she's a woman. I don't know. Darth says, my best friend's an atheist. My other friends, Dutch Reformed Church and monarchist Discord friends, are Baptist, Catholic, atheist, and Lutheran. We all get along great. Well, that's fine. I love having discussions with people of different beliefs, because you'll never expand your own understanding of the world if you only talk to people that agree with you. Dan says, do you like when non-religious people wear a cross, religious jewelry just for fashion? Do I like it? Not particularly. Do I care? Not particularly, because quite frankly, I don't wear a cross. You don't, look, I got tattoos all over me, and guess what? No cross. Maybe I will one day, maybe I won't. I don't think that, you should never, ever. But there's nothing, if I wear a cross around my neck, does that mean that I'm more of a Christian than someone who doesn't? No. And quite frankly, some people do it, I think, to try and virtue signal, and that's not me. I am who I am. And so I'm not going to sit there and try and put on display something to try and say, look, I'm better than you. Wrench Bird. I don't know if I should. I mean, Bird is like kind of a jerk. Let's see. Sci-Fi Nation says, I dig the whole Run DMC look you was rocking on those old videos, although the beard thing almost non-existent. It was sort of frightening. Yeah, the beard was much, much shorter back then. Alexander says, I want to see Google pay taxes, Amazon too. Well, taxes are, here's the thing when it comes to taxes. A lot of people like to get on these big corporations for not paying taxes. And they say how evil these corporations are because they're not paying taxes. No, that has nothing to do with corporation being evil. That has to do with the government giving these corporations huge tax breaks that they have not earned, right? The government actually gives they set up the tax system to try to, we're going to give you a break because we want you to keep your business here and do this, so we're going to give you a break on your taxes, and we're going to give you write-offs for this and write-offs for that and write-offs for this. And before you know it, if you have good accountants, you end up paying no taxes, right? The only way you're going to ever see Google and Amazon or anybody else pay their fair share of taxes is if you completely rewrite the tax code and get rid of all the loopholes. All the loopholes. And yes, that includes the loopholes that benefit us, right? And that's the problem. Everybody wants to say, those corporations, they're evil. They don't pay taxes. Oh, yeah? Do you take your standard deduction? Do you write off the deduction for your kids? Do you write off your mortgage if you have one? Well, of course, I'm supposed to do that. Well, they're just doing the same thing on a grander scale. And so, you know what? I say get rid of it all. I don't think that companies should be able to write off if they, do various things or they hire certain groups of people or whatever. They shouldn't be able to write all that off. I also don't think that individuals should get a tax break just because they own a house. Dan says, one thing Facebook does is by email, it warns you about what you say, even if it's in a private messaging chat, you're being monitored. That's kind of creepy. If we're on a voice, what do you call on this? Wait, Darth says, if we're on a voice, what do we call you on this channel? Well, you can call me Michael. You can call me Rational Roundtable. You can even call me Anti-Tracker. That's fine. But if you're trying to get my attention in the chat, you got to put at Rational Roundtable. Miles, Rational Roundtable. You asked what might bring me happiness. Utter domination of known space and the pleasure of hearing that all my enemies have died in terrible, highly improbable accidents and cannot be connected to me. Well, at least you're honest, Miles. You're sick, but you're honest. Dad says, what do you think the purpose of Stonehenge in the UK is? No freaking idea. I'm not an expert on Stonehenge. I think it's cool. My understanding is really that if you look at it, it's a very accurate, basically, sundial. But I don't know what the general purpose of it is. Darth Revan says, Mr. Poopy Face. Thanks, I guess. Dan says, is there anything else built long ago in this world that you do not understand why it was built? Well, I don't know why they built the heads on Easter Island, right? But I don't lose sleep over it. Sir, bird's bullying me, sir. Well, you better ban him then. Do you think you can see a natural looking face on Mars? Well, I think that as you're talking about the face of Mars, does it look like a face? Sure. Is it a face? It looks more like a mountain range that just happens to cast shadows similar to a face to me, but whatever. Lilith was mentioned twice and is a monster, I think, in Iraq. Okay. And Darren says, Lilith isn't just Jewish folklore like the Golem. She's feminist folklore as well. Well, that's true. But but as far as Lilith is concerned, I'm not overly concerned about her not being in the Bible because that's just, it's not, people get obsessed over these things like they're important and they're really not. And then Darren says, seriously, the Moby Dick castration thing is the theme of the book. Well, I've never read the book Moby Dick, and if so, that's icky. And so, yeah. Dan says, what's your opinion on the song What a Fool Believes by the Doobie Brothers? It's a song by the Doobie Brothers. That's my opinion of it. Watch Keeping Mum a Vicar is going to a conference and can't figure out anything to write, and they read the Song of Solomon. It's a good movie. His mother-in-law kills anyone who hurts the family. That sounds really bizarre, Darth. Track 95 says, I think you need to come up with a word like quantum for this channel. Yes, we do. I don't know what yet, but we do. Admiral Saval says, does God really hate me? He gay community, Mike. Does God really hate me? He gay community. If you mean that, and I don't know, if you're saying you're gay, Admiral Saval, I don't know your sexuality, but if you're saying you're gay, does God hate you? No, the Westboro Baptist Church is one of the most disgusting, vile insults to the concept of Christianity that I know of. I don't believe that God hates anyone. And Alexander says, I like Black Plague history. This is a way to study how society collapses when a kind of historical event happens. Well, you can find that interesting, the study of the history of it, but you asked if I like the Black Plague, not particularly. And I'm not really a history buff, so if you like studying that kind of thing, Alexander, good for you. Not my cup of tea. And again, the name I cannot pronounce says, yes, those who fear the shadows outside the circle and speak to none but in their circle. Who is it again who walked among the sinners? Oh, right, Jesus. Exactly. Jesus walked around with what was considered the dregs of society. And, but Christians today are, they're afraid. Sci-Fi Nation says that Rick was meant to say Trek and was saying fans of the on-screen stuff as absolute, but not the books and other beta canon who is all licensed. Well, yeah, it depends on what you're arguing about. If you're sci-fi, if you're talking about canon issues, like Darren and I have been arguing about the Romulans, right? And if you're arguing about canonical issues, then you have to establish what are the rules of canon. And generally speaking, is that with Trek, if it's on screen, it's canon. If it's not on screen, it ain't canon, right? That's basically what Darren is saying, and I don't have a problem with that. Like, for example, one not on-screen thing that would highly support his copycat theory is apparently, and I haven't seen it, but people commented about it. Apparently, there's a deleted scene from Balance of Terror in which Commander Hansen, who is on Earth Outpost 4 just before it's blown up at the beginning of the episode, says that the Romulan ship is impersonating a Federation ship. However, since that's not in the actual episode, doesn't matter, you can't use it. Now, where Darren's mistake with all that, though, is that he kept saying in his last video on the subject that I solely depend on this crap from Star Trek 3. No. Star Trek 3 is incidental in my argument. Most of what I was saying is, and the only reason I mentioned Star Trek 3 repeatedly in my video is I say, if you look at Trek prior to Star Trek 3, this is how the Romulans were portrayed. I'm not saying Star Trek 3 is the reason, and that's something I think, Darren, you misunderstood. I'm not saying Star Trek 3 is a reason that my argument is true. I'm saying that Star Trek 3 is just basically a dividing line of when the Romulans kind of changed. However, I'm actually changing that a little bit looking in my next video because I have been watching almost every appearance of the Romulans, and it strengthens my case immensely, Darren. You're not going to like what I have to say. So, Not Ryan John says, Bird is not a jerk, he's Kurogan. Oh, wait, never mind. Yeah, same thing. I get annoyed. April Lavigne wore rosary beads and a hat. She's not Catholic. Well, yeah, people that do that, you know, I take it with a grain of salt. I know that the reason some people will do that, is to deliberately piss off the religious, right? Like Madonna, back in the 80s, used religious iconography in her songs, specifically because she was trying to say F you to the Catholics because she was raised Catholic. And quite frankly, if you're that immature that you think you have to go, wah, you're bad, whatever, dude, you need some more security. Alexander says, I pay all my taxes. Well, that's good. Darren says, at the present time, with the tax code we do have, it is irresponsible for any corporation to pay more in taxes than they are required to. I agree. And in fact, it's irresponsible for anyone to pay more taxes than they have to. Alexander says, what brings me joy is Asian Muslim wife born in the USSR. This is the best choice. I know that. I know that is true. Neo Normie says, shouldn't capitalism be back to winning and losing as tax breaks and bailouts as socialism? That's just for the poor billionaires. I don't like tax bailouts or bailouts and tax breaks any more than the next guy. That's why I say we need a flat tax. But people bitch and say, oh, flat taxes isn't fair because poor people have to pay taxes. We need write-offs for the poor people. But then when you put write-offs for the poor people, then the people in the middle income say, that's not fair. Why do poor people get these breaks? Okay, we'll give you a break too. And then the rich people say, wait a minute, that's not fair. How come we got to pay everything and they all get breaks? So then they get break, and it just gets convoluted and becomes the tax mess that we have right now. How about this? No freaking tax write-offs, period. If you're going to do an income tax, if that's the tax of choice in this country, then fine. You say, okay, 10%, done. No argument, no discussion, no write-offs, 10%, or whatever percentage it ends up being. Doesn't every society, old or new, leave markings or try to leave permanent mark on the world? Sure. Doesn't mean that that's a good or a bad thing. Darren says, I agree that Moby Dick is a pretty disgusting book. That's why it initially failed. It wasn't until generations later that it became an American classic. Well, that's interesting. And Mrs. Anti-Trekker just subscribed to the channel, so welcome, babe. Mage Grey Wolf says, presupposition apologist gets under my skin because it tells people what they think and believe and assumes the person is lying if they say otherwise. I agree. Presuppositionalists, I've argued with them a few times, Mage. And yes, they basically try to say, well, you already know what I'm saying is true, and therefore anything you say to the contrary is irrelevant, right? And they think that they have this wonderful golden argument, and the problem is that the laughable thing about this is that they could sit there and say, I win the argument. You know what? They're doing the same thing that some of these atheists do that say, well, atheism is just a lack of belief, and so you can't say that I'm saying there's no God. I just lack your belief in God, and therefore I have no position for you to argue against. Therefore, we can't have a debate because I automatically win. Presuppositionalists do that, the same thing, just on the other side. Well, I believe that anything that I say you already know is true, and therefore if you say it's not true, that you're just lying, and therefore I win. Shut up. Have a real debate. Um, Redmond says, when you go on holiday in the Middle East, when out for a walk, this wingman wearing a pink pussy hat and forces female shirt looks at you and screeches, cis male, you look and say, my God, it's Lilith. That I'm not planning on that happening, but yes. Flies off screaming, don't assume my gender. Wow. Do you know the Chinese eunuch rarely lived past the procedure, but it was a good way to earn a living during the imperial graze? Well, that's creepy. No, I did not know that. I'm not never studied the idea of eunuchs. Darth Vader says, generally the most accepting and diverse group are nerds. I actually agree with that. But part of that, the reason I think that nerds are more tolerant, more accepting of others than other groups is because the one thing that's universally true of nerds is that we were basically the outcasts of our various groups. And so nerds being outcasts don't like to make other people into outcasts. Darren says, adhering to strict rules of canon bites me in the ass as much as it bites those who disagree with me. I look forward to your next video response. Well, yeah, the problem is, Darren, it's like we're arguing over this whole thing when you admitted in your first video that one shot from Minefield completely ruins your entire argument. One of the interesting problems with our tax code is that you cannot give a tax break to the poor and middle class without simultaneously giving it to the rich. Yeah, I know. And people don't understand that. And they'll say, like, for example, if they reduce income taxes by 1% across the board, people say, that's not fair because someone who makes $1 billion gets a much bigger tax break than somebody who makes $1,000. Well, yeah. But they're still paying a whole lot more in taxes. All tax is evil, even a flat tax. I don't know about evil, Resolute, because I think they're necessary. Dan says, there was a news story recently, a lady who works for a coffee shop chain beaten up because company doesn't pay taxes correctly, and I don't think an employee who works in the shop should be attacked. So someone attacked an employee of a coffee shop because the company doesn't pay enough taxes. That person needs to be put in prison. And yeah, you know what? There are lots of companies that I disagree with their corporate practices, but I don't blame every employee of said company. You know, the people that make the actual decisions, usually some kind of executive board or whatever, they're the ones responsible. I just don't argue about religion when nobody imposed it to me or nobody not suffered discrimination because of it. I'm not sure what you mean by not suffered discrimination because of it. However, nobody is forcing well, I can't speak for Canada, but in the United States, people say, oh, quit forcing your religion on me. Nobody is forcing their religion on you. It's not even possible. You know, if somebody knocking on your door and say, hey, you want to talk about Jesus? That's not forcing their religion on you. Get over it. We need to make a giant, and I mean huge wall or block or something of our history from all recorded history and then put it on the moon as a reminder we exist, and have second one of photographs so they can see what our world was like, both good and bad. That would be interesting, but I don't think that would ever happen. Do you think Star Trek is sexist towards women? Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on, first of all, yes and no. I think that the original series, for example, was a product of its time. There are times where women are portrayed as being basically more frail, more stereotypically female, if you might say. However, it was also a very progressive show in that respect, in that they had female officers and strong female characters that popped up on the show now and then. So it was a product of its time, but it was ahead of the curve. And I think that's a hallmark of the original series. Next Generation, I think, was incredibly sexist. And I also think that Voyager was quite sexist, and Enterprise a little sexist. And the funny thing is, on those shows, they tried to show how enlightened they were while displaying how sexist they were. For example, Troy, always on display with her low-cut tops and all that, while every other crew member had to wear a uniform, right? And what is it that Troy did when she got to, oh, I need chocolate. Oh, golly, I need chocolate. Oh, man, how about that scene of Troy and Dr. Crusher doing their yoga workout The whole point of that scene being basically porn for 12-year-olds. All right. So, and in fact, I remember Red Letter Media made a big old joke about it, where he's like, oh, yeah, baby, work it. I'm sorry. Yeah, that show put it. Well, maybe sexist isn't the right term, but they definitely objectified women on a pretty regular basis. Um, so, did that happen? Yes. Does that make the show bad? No. I think that's a unfortunate element of the show. And like I said, when you look at Voyager, 7 of 9 in her cat suit, later to Paul in her cat suit, it almost became a Star Trek trope that you have to have a hot chick in a cat suit. And that is sexist. Opinion on bell ringing. Well, bells are for ringing. Not sure what you mean. When the vote, when they vote law based on religious belief, like banned abortion, this has imposed religion value on people. Wrong answer, Alexander. I'm sorry. But just because somebody disagrees with abortion, it is not imposing their religion on you. All right? You may think abortion is awesome and somebody else thinks abortion is bad. All right? I happen to be a anti-choice. That's my official stance. I am not pro-life. I'm not pro-choice. I am anti-choice. And when I say that, it's because I say that abortion is a medical procedure, and the only person who is qualified to advise on whether or not an abortion should be performed is a doctor, not a freaking politician. All right? So this should not be, and I'm sorry, abortion is not something like, oh, golly, I'm going to go get an abortion, even though that's what pro-choicers seem to want. And I don't think abortion should be banned like pro-lifers. That being said, if somebody believes that, and generally the argument is something to the effect of this, life is sacred. Therefore, terminating life is a crime. Therefore, I'm going to vote against abortion. That is not pushing their religion on you. That's simply saying they don't believe that it is a moral thing to terminate. Now, you may agree or disagree with that, but it's not, you are being paranoid if you think that that's imposing religion on you. And that's the problem with these days, is that people think that, oh, just because Christians tend to be pro-life, if pro-life ever wins the day, that's forcing religion. No, it's not. Now, if you have a state-sanctioned religion and you are required to be an adherent of that religion, that is forcing religion. But guess what? We don't have that in the United States. I can't speak for Canada, but in the United States, not only do we not have that, we have a constitutional amendment to make sure that that never happens. Bird Prey asks how Enterprise is sexist, but I already kind of talked about it. To Paul and her cat suit. And so that's honestly all it is. Well, if you look at James Bond, now that's really sexist, but it was the 60s. Well, James Bond was sexist all the way. The only time James Bond was not, he was not, the franchise isn't necessarily sexist, but Bond himself is a womanizer. Now, there's a difference between the franchise being sexist and a character in the franchise being a womanizer. That being said, there are also lots and lots of strong women in the Bond franchise all the way back to the beginning. I'm sorry. Yes, the name is a joke, but freaking Pussy Galore kicked ass and took names, and she was not a pushover for Bond to just sleep with. All right, so don't think that just because Bond is known for sleeping around that the franchise is sexist. It just means that Bond slept around. And Alexander talking about 7 of 9 with lots of hearts. Sci-Fi Nation says, that was my favorite TNG scene of all time when I was a kid. Kind of still is. Of course. Is sexism meaning one sex is better than the other in the same way that racism means one race is better than the other? So how are Star Trek catsuits sexist? Well, that's why I corrected myself there and said it's really more objectification than sexism. That's really a more accurate term. Yes, I agree with you on abortion. 100% different viewpoint, but same result. Yeah. To Paul, naked scene though, all the hotness. Well, you know what? That's the thing though. If you're objectifying women, then many women consider that sexist, right? Kate Mulgrew, with her whole thing about Star Trek is sexist, was probably, she was talking about that kind of stuff, right? She was talking about objectification of women and stuff like that. The problem is she's acting like it was unique to Trek. Trek was ahead of the curve on that stuff. right? There are shows. I mean, look at freaking Baywatch. The whole point of Baywatch was to have women with big boobs running in slow motion in bikinis. I think the reason some people attack an employee of a company is to send a message to the bosses, perhaps, but it's still wrong. How about you sue the company, or you just write a letter of protest? I'm always amazed, even though I should not be, about how many women love sexist entertainment like 007 films and shows like Mad Men. Well, I can't speak for Mad Men, but I will tell you, Mrs. Anti-Checker really likes the James Bond films. And I don't, the thing is, Bond is a man's man, right? Bond is, he's the man that all men want to be and all women want to be with him. That's the whole idea of James Bond, right? And yes, he has sex with a whole lot of women, but that doesn't mean he hates women or anything. He just, sees them. He's against attachment. Let's see. Alexander says, if God exists, he created the MCU Aunt May, and he has no problem with the MCU Aunt May naked. Okay. That's different. Who here watched Baywatch for the plot? Honestly, I never watched Baywatch. I remember seeing a commercial for Baywatch when it was first coming out, and you saw David Hasselhoff and these two chicks with big boobs running down the beach in slow motion, and I was like, really? That's a show? No thanks. So yeah. Steve says the red letter parts of the Bible are my favorite. Well, the red letter parts are, of course, in Bibles that have the red letter edition, that's usually a signifier that that's something that was actually uttered from the mouth of Jesus himself, as opposed to the rest of the Bible is just written either about Jesus in the New Testament or about other things in the Old. But yeah, Mr. Liddell is shocked that Baywatch had plots. Well, I don't know. I never watched the show. I don't even know what the I know that they were lifeguards, but that's really about all I know. Dan wants to, do I watch Star Trek videos on the YouTube channel Major Grin? I've heard of Major Grin. I don't think I've ever seen the channel, though. And Alexander says, I don't watch Baywatch, but Barbed Wire is a masterpiece. Well, I disagree with you on that. But here's the thing, is there a problem with beautiful women, right? Obviously, I don't think so. I think beautiful women are freaking awesome. However, I do have a problem with the gratuitous objectification of women. That's why even though, for example, I like the Enterprise series as a whole, I did not appreciate T'Pol's catsuit, especially in the later seasons when she actually joins the crew of the Enterprise and she's actually wearing rank pips with everybody else. She should be in a Starfleet uniform like everybody else. That is wrong. Now, that being said, do I think that, I don't want to see Jolene Baylock in a catsuit? No, she looks great except for the hair, but I don't think that, but I think it's gratuitous to put her in a catsuit apart from everyone else. Same problem I had with Troy, same problem I had with 7 of 9. All right, is that they are singling out a character that they say, this character has a nice body, so we're going to put them in this catsuit, and everybody else wears a standard uniform. That's why it feels like it's sexism or at the very least objectification to me, and that's why I don't like it. If everybody wore catsuits, fine. I watch Buck Rogers for the cool sci-fi and not Aaron Gray's outfits. Well, actually, and that's a good example. Buck Rogers did do that, and I didn't like that. I actually think Battlestar Galactica was a better show, and they didn't do that as much as they did on Buck Rogers. Buck Rogers was horrible about that. The decon chamber in the early Enterprise episodes is a pretty bad contribution from the powers that should not have been at UPN. I agree. The decon chambers were 100% gratuitous, and I mean, gosh, talk about with a little bit of editing and add some cheesy music, you could really make that into a commercial for a porno. I mean, it's just horrible. Let's see. Darth Revan says, I love scenes or episodes before big battles when everyone might die and they're talking about having fun, but you can feel death in the air, like in the episode of Game of Thrones Season 8. Well, I didn't watch any Game of Thrones Season 8, so I couldn't speak to that. But I do think sometimes the calm before the battle are some really good scenes. Let's see. The YouTube channel I mentioned, or recently posted a video about Star Trek sexism to women. Oh, I didn't know that, but no, it's not, to me, it's not a major issue. But I'm not going to sit there and cover my eyes and pretend that it doesn't exist, right? In the original series, a lot of people complained about the sexy outfits that some of the women wore in the original series. I defer to what Mecha Random said about that. It was really a sign of liberation that these women could wear that kind of stuff, because back then in the 60s, women couldn't get away with wearing stuff like that showed any skin. And the fact that they got away with it because it's a sci-fi environment, and many of the women that were on the show felt it quite liberating to be able to display their sexiness on television. That being said, you didn't have a single member of the crew that was basically picked out to be the sexy one and have them wear a different outfit than everybody else. Neo Normie says you should look up the channel movie night as Oscurist Lupa had a 5-minute short review of Baywatch called Baywatching. It's very funny. Also, Baywatch Nights is fantastic. Well, you can. I never was interested in watching Baywatch. I'm just going to be honest with you about that. Catsuit on Kirk. Thank you, but no. Well, yeah, no thanks. I smell a new skit for Mr. Miles, Enterprise porn spoof. Although I had to laugh when Enterprise did a parody of its own decon chamber scenes when they did one with Phlox and T'Pol on the decon chamber while T'Pol was experiencing Pon farr. I don't remember that one. I'm sure it was horrible. Scene Das Boot. Ooh, that's good scenes with tension. Das Boot was all tension. That was a great movie. I would argue the TOS was just as sexist as Enterprise. How many times did Kirk go without a shirt or have it ripped, cut, or whatever? That is a male trope version of the catsuit. You know, it's interesting that you say that, because the Kirk chest on display was a relatively common trope of the original series. Now, but here's the thing. While it's true that, yes, they would show Kirk get his shirt ripped off, they would show, his shirt cut open, and, so you could see his awesome 1960s pecs and all that. However, they also, on the original series, had women in sexy outfits and, women that would be in love with Kirk, and they would have these romance things. I think the interesting thing about TOS is that it's really the only Trek show in which there's just as much man candy as woman candy. I didn't even think about that, Miles, but I think that's actually an interesting fact, that if anything, they're the least sexist because they objectified both men and women pretty much equally. The original catsuit, Catwoman, yes, but that's different because she was freaking Catwoman. Chris keeps dying in Space Engineers. When are you coming on today? I'll check it out. I'll come on for a little bit right after the stream here, and Thomas, see if we can figure out why Chris is dying. And see if we can figure it out, because we're trying to get the next round set up, and Chris and Thomas are helping us get it set up. The episode where Pulaski actress played the blind companion to that ambassador in a box, sexism pure. Why was that one particularly sexist? I'm not sure. I know that, you could argue Wolf in the Fold was a little bit sexist, where Spock was saying that women are more easily and more deeply terrified than men. However, the funny thing is that there's a certain level of truth to that women tend to be more emotionally connected than men are. So even though, and Spock just says things in a very blunt and blatant way. So is it sexist if it's technically true? Just wondering. The decon scene parody scene was not horrible. It was funny. It was also the last time they did a scene like that. I don't remember that at all. Steve says the Book of Acts is another favorite. I really like the Book of Acts. That's actually a good one to get into if you want to see how the church is supposed to be run. Now we've kind of gotten into a Star Trek thing for some reason. Darth Aaron says T'Pol should have worked out in a uniform, and Archer said, "Welcome to the United Earth." Walked out in a uniform, and Archer said, "Welcome." Yes. I agree. I think that T'Pol should have been in a uniform from the moment that she became the official first officer of the ship. Don't forget green alien babies that want to mate with Captain Kirk. I don't, no, actually, the funny thing is, there was one green alien babe that kind of wanted to mate with Captain Kirk, and that was played by Yvonne Craig, aka Batgirl. However, Kirk in the original series never actually had sex with a green alien babe. he did in the J.J. Abrams films, but not in the original run of Trek. That's a trope that never happened. Greetings, Night Checkers. Should that be Rational Roundtable and fellow nerds? Hey, Shermer, good to see you. The original version of Stargate SG-1 pilot for the TV show had full naked woman. In other versions of the episode, they removed that or show less. Yeah, but here's the thing. Nudity in and of itself is not sexist or even objectification. It depends on if it's considered gratuitous or not. Now, I know the scene you're talking about. I haven't actually seen the uncensored version of the scene, but I know the scene you're talking about. It's when the Gawauld get that one woman, and they're basically, I think they're prepping her or something to become another Gawauld or something like that. Mr. Miles can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's the basic gist of it. And depending on how it's done, I think that if they're looking at her and making sure that she's fit and good to be a Gawauld female, that's not necessarily that's not necessarily gratuitous. However, if they cut it out because they felt it was in bad taste, fine. That's not less sexist, it's more sexist, but balanced. You have to add more to balance. So, no, well, sexist would mean that you feel that one sex is superior or inferior to the other. So if both sexes are on display equally, that is not sexist. You could say that it's objectifying both sexes, but you couldn't say it is sexist. I think the decon chainer is a good idea, is an idea plot-wise, but implementation was flawed. Agreed. Ever seen Halle Berry's Catwoman? Sure. Yeah, you know what? Halle Berry's Catwoman, yeah, she looked great in the suit, but that was, yeah. Halle Berry, actually, I'll tell you, Halle Berry really pissed me off in Swordfish when she showed her boobs, because and Miss Antrick will tell you, that scene pissed me off. Not because I thought, oh, God, no, because I think Halle Berry is hot, but it's because she literally sold her tits for, what, $100,000 or whatever. Darth Red says, how's the leg? Hurting, which I'm going to be wrapping it up here pretty soon because, yeah, I'm definitely feeling the burn right now. He also says, certain dialogues in the episode, especially in the Ready Room, watch it, objectifying her was beyond acceptable. Certain dialogues in the episode, especially the Ready Room, which episode, Yosef? You got to give me the whole thing. I can't. The episode, the one with Pulaski as the blind chick. The thing is, and I've said this before, the original series was definitely a product of its time, and some of the writing reflected that. And I don't like it, but it's a fact of the day, and I can't change that. However, does that make it... but the interesting thing is that it's still way ahead of the curve as far as how women were treated as a whole. Yes, something can be sexist and factual. Nature itself is sexist if you really want to get into it. Well, that's interesting. An interesting way to put it, Mr. Miles, because I don't know if that's true. I don't know because here's the thing. If sexism means that you believe one sex is superior or inferior to the other, if, for example, you call out the fact that women tend to be more emotionally connected than men, is that saying women are inferior or superior to men? Because you could argue, well, you're saying that women are inferior to men because you're saying that women are more emotional. Other people might say, well, you're actually saying that women are superior to men because you're saying that women are able to understand emotions better than men. So is it sexist when it's just a fact? And it doesn't necessarily mean women are more or less capable of doing what women do. Let's see. Star Trek Voyager Tuvok was naked in one episode, but I think it was his nightmare. I don't remember that. Nature is what really defines gender roles. I think, I know you said early gender roles there, but I think that nature still defines gender roles. It's just that modern society is trying to fight that because we think in the modern secular wisdom that we have that we know better than God how men and women should behave. And that it's better for women to be in charge and better for men to be at home with the kids and basically flip everything upside down and black is white and white is black and up is down and down is up and all that crap. And quite frankly, I think that it's wrong. And I think it's ironic because of the fact that the Bible predicted it. Did sci-fi ever make you cry? Absolutely. Man, the death of Spock hit me hard. What's your favorite Old Testament story? That's a tough one. That is a very, very tough one. I would have to say Job. Sci-Fi Station says, why would I make you cry? I don't know why you would, but, apparently you did. Star Trek Into Darkness, they had the lady get changed in a shuttlecraft next to Kirk before that movie came out. It was one image they used to promote it a lot. Yes, and I did not like that at all. That was gratuitous. Yes, they removed the nude scene in the final cut. It was only thrown in there because the network thought it was needed to pull in the viewers to the new show. They fought it but lost. Yeah, nudity, just for nudity's sake, is never a good thing. Darren says, I've never been all that impressed with Halle Berry on any level. Well, to each their own. I think she's hot. You may not. Alexander saying, feel the burn. Yes, I did say feel the burn. I expect women being different. I expect women being different than men. We are equal, but we are not the same, and many people do not understand that. Exactly, Joseph. You're 100% right. The problem is that in the modern era, different somehow means one is superior and one is inferior. Mr. Londell says, best Catwoman ever, Eartha Kitt, prove me wrong. I can't prove you wrong because I agree with you 100%. I think Eartha Kitt was, in fact, the best Catwoman. Nature controls gender, but our social environments define them. There are two lights burning for each other there are two lights burning for each other in marriage. Well, I'm not sure why you said there are two lights burning for each other in marriage. However, no. Nature controls gender, but our social environments define them? No. Male is male, female is female. Sorry. And to my trans friends, sorry, male is male and female is female. And you may not like what you are, and you may want to surgically alter yourself, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not saying you can't do that, but male is male and female is female. End of discussion. Job is probably mine as well. Yeah, I really like the Job story, especially when going through a tough time like I have been this last year. Job has been kind of a inspiration for me to keep going. Waking Moments, says Trek 95. I'm not sure what that was. Adam, I'm not sure why you said Waking Moments there. Not really sure. Iron Wolf says, I was going to say the Book of Job as well, but I suspect for completely different reasons. Well, it depends. Like some people like the Book of Job because of the interaction between God and the devil. Some people like, Job's resolve. Some people like, the Job is kind of a real book. Job is one of the few times in the Bible where you see someone question God, and one thing that I do find interesting is that Job never sinned in all of that, and the book even says as much. Even though God kind of tells him off a little bit, Job didn't do anything wrong. What if in future Trek, when they change their clothes, it's transported, they turn into a beam and bang, new uniform, no nudity or anything? I could see that. That would make perfectly sense. Richie says, God really did a number on Job. Well, yes and no. God allowed the devil to do a number on Job. Read the book. God didn't do anything to Job, technically. I think it shows a good example of how much of a dick guy can be just to win a bet. How much a dick guy can be just to win a bet. Well, except that, the devil did everything, and, basically he convinced God to let him do anything and everything except for kill him. And yet, still lost the bet. Dude, be careful of the new hate speech laws on YouTube about genders that can get you shut down. That's why I'm on this channel and not Anti-Trekker. That's the whole point of the existence of this channel, is that I can talk about stuff without worrying about whether they shut me down. Now, the sad thing is that they shut me down and then they shut down Anti-Trekker because they know that it's the same guy. That would suck. But, I'm doing the best I can. Didn't Job finally give in to the sin of pride? No, he did not. So Miles says, I said early gender roles because there was a point in our history where men could take advantage of our size and build to dominate women. Well, the thing is that men are still physically stronger, and all that, and the differences between men and women are still there. Women are still much better child rearers than men overall. Now, granted, there are exceptions, and that's the thing. People point to the exception and say, but wait a minute. This person over here, the dude was a good child rearer and his wife was horrible at it. That doesn't change the fact that in 99.9% of cases, the woman makes a better child rearer than men. And so please do not try to cite the exception to prove the rule, because that is the very nature of an exception. Schromer says, I really like the stories of Habakkuk. God sent the angel who grabbed him by the hair to get him to do what needed to be done. He was the guy who gave food to Daniel. Yes, we actually did Habakkuk as a study at our church recently. 7 of 9 to be the reason of that channel. Okay. Not sure why. Enter is sad when you can't be sure that your channel stays for such simple reasons. Yeah, I know. YouTube has become a place where everybody unless you are a far left progressive SJW type, you have to be in doubt as to whether or not Google will let you survive. And that to me is horrifically bad. It's dangerous and it scares me. And it doesn't just scare me because, if I lose my channel, it'll devastate me financially. That's true. But what I'm talking about is Google literally scares me. Google is trying to take over the world, people. Google is trying to influence people, to influence elections, to change the way we think. And they just may succeed at it. So Google is the evil corporation that people were scared of. The ironic thing is that Hollywood kept talking about these big evil conservative corporations, but the big evil corporations are actually quite liberal. Let's see. Job was given even greater blessings from the Lord after the events in Job. That is correct. And if you believe in the afterlife, he'll be rewarded even more. That is also correct. I read of the band Wordless. I feel a red wave coming this way, and it sounds communistic. Yeah, I know. There are still differences, I agree. I don't say that that's what defines sexism, but one point in human society, guys could literally beat women into submission legally. Right, but that's not the same as gender roles, right? Now, men abusing women, regardless of when in history you're talking about, is morally reprehensible, regardless of the laws of the day or whatever. And that's not the natural state of things. Men abusing women is not. And in fact, read the frickin' Bible. The Bible does not advocate for spousal abuse, even though some people try to say it does. John says, why can't I super chat on this channel? Because this channel is not monetized. But if you look, there is a link in the description that says streamlabs.com/rational roundtable, and you can super chat that way if you want to. But thank you for the thought. Star Trek DS9 says, no one knows what a Breen looks like, but does Kira? She has taken some Breen suits and put them on. Good question. Look into a DLive account for when they shut you down. Well, I already have an account on, oh gosh, now I forget what it's called. Mr. Miles, what's that stupid account called? And you can put the link in the chat if you want. But honestly, and Mrs. Anti-Trekker's account, you can subscribe to Mrs. Anti-Trekker. That's a backup account. So hopefully it won't come down to that, but yeah. The natural state of things, humans are animals. Not sure what your point there is. Darth Vader says, hey, bud, got to fly, be well, and mind the knee. Thank you. Give my best to Mrs. Anti-Trekker. I will. I think Trek did that transporter thing at first contact when Picard said computer 21st century appropriate clothing. Yeah, you kind of wonder where they got the clothes from, but the funny thing is never before or since was that ever a thing. I remember back when red meant on the far left and blue meant conservative, and it wasn't that long ago. That's true. Better dead than red, right? I've actually done something similar to you. I use this channel for comments, but set up a nerd channel, Mountains of Elysium, and a Catholic channel, Catholic Maquis. Very cool, yeah. Miles Restaurant, humans fight our nature, but the instincts are still there. Thank you, it's BitChute, yes. Thank you, Miles. Warning, do not wear a Google headset. I don't own a Google headset. And there, if you see Mr. Miles, put the link to my BitChute account there. Granted, BitChute sucks, but it is a fallback. And so, let's see. Steve says, I do not base my actions or behaviors on the Bible says. That seems like an incomplete statement, like you were about to say something else. Alexander says, I'm red and not dead. I know, Alexander, but the idea of that was an old expression said in the United States, better dead than red, during the Cold War, the idea being that we would never surrender to the communist menace. Now, I know you believe in communism, Alexander, but I'm not trying to cite communism as being evil. However, I disagree with it from a philosophical perspective. I think that it is, in fact, wrong. My point was that just that nature itself is sexist because the gender roles where males usually can do and dominate the females. Humans are just animals, but with bigger brains. I know you don't agree with that exactly, but that's my view. Well, humans are animals with bigger brains. We're biological life forms, just like dogs are and everything else. But if you... Sci-Fi says, try using Subscribestar. I haven't set up Subscribestar yet. I do have a Patreon, but... I haven't messed around with Subscribestar much. But anyway, Miles, the thing is that just because men are physically more powerful than women doesn't make it sexist, because women have certain advantages as well. So it's such as the emotional connection that I talked about before. Women can also control men much easier than men can control women. Partially because of our reproductive drive. Men have a much higher reproductive drive than women, which also makes sense because of the way that we reproduce. And so with all of that, they're different. There are differences. Some things men have advantages in, some things women have advantages in, but that does not make it sexist. Because different does not mean superior. Remember when Google used to have that saying, don't be evil? I believe the people that came up with that saw it as a possibility for the future of Google. Well, Google is evil now, period. I'll say it. And the stream will probably end any second now. BitChute doesn't have streaming. DLive is for streaming. Gotcha. Do you think female cats are more emotional than male cats? I don't know. I've never done a study on cats. I'm talking about humans. There are some species of, when you look in the animal kingdom, some species, women are physically more powerful than men. Females more powerful than males, because women and men is really about humans. But there are some species of animals where the females are more powerful and the males are not. There are some species where the males do the child rearing and the women do not, or the females do not, etc. But I'm talking about humanity. That's why I keep going back to the nature, the basics, taking the human special side out of it. You can't take the human special side out of it, because regardless of whether or not you're an atheist, a theist, or anything else, you can't deny that humans are at the top of the food chain. We seem to be the most intelligent creature on the planet at the very least. We're the only creature that has developed advanced technology, etc. So yes, humans are special regardless of your theological perspective. I like you have long hair. How do you respond to 1 Corinthians 11:14? Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it's a disgrace for him? Just curious. Well, that's actually interesting. Now, I'd have to look at the full context of that particular verse. If I remember it correctly, and I could be off here because I'm doing this off the top of my head, but is that when Paul's talking about these types of things, and that's not the only thing Paul talks about, not just in Corinthians, but in several of his letters, as far as appearances and behaviors and stuff like that. When he talks about women wearing jewelry or putting gold in their hair, or being uncovered or covered in church and stuff like that. All those things are based on local societies. Part of the reason, for example, and I can't remember if it's Corinthians or one of the other books, that Paul writes about women not wearing jewelry is because in that same town is a temple that featured prostitutes where the women would wear all this jewelry. And he's basically saying, don't go to church dressed like a hoe. That would be the modern way of saying it. As far as in Corinth at that time, men with long hair had a significant meaning that it does not to us in the United States today. Let's see. I'm talking about nature in general broadly. Humans are only one part of it. Why do you focus on humans when I focus on life as a whole? Because life as a whole is not the same. Then you completely lose focus. There is no focusing in on everything. That's the exact opposite of focusing in. If you want to talk about humans and humanity and is nature sexist, that's fine. But if you want to talk about every species, well, in some species females dominate, in other species males dominate, in some species males nurture, in other species females nurture, in some species male do the hunting and gathering, other species females do the hunting. So what? It's not sexist, it's just different. The Catholic Church does teach men and women are equal but different. We are complementary halves, together are better. Agreed. There are already lots said I don't agree with, but I knew I wouldn't, and that's basically the reason I'm listening. Well, I appreciate that, Mage, and that's okay. We can disagree about stuff as long as we're not dicks about it. I'm saying nature is sexist, but you say I'm talking about people. Okay, fine, but that wasn't my comment. I don't think nature is sexist. And it's just, when I talk about humans, it's because human experience is what we know best. If you want to talk about birds, fine, we'll talk about freaking birds. But if you want to just change the subject left and right and pick every species out and try to say, well, this one, you know, if I say, well, men tend to be physically stronger, but not over here. Well, see, that's why talking about all life is not going to be a helpful conversation, Miles. If you want to say that nature is sexist, give me something specific. Why is nature sexist? What about, and by the way, it's not, yeah, just because roles are different does not make it sexist. That's my main point. I see skipping chats addressed to you now. I see it as, I didn't mean to, Sci-Fi Nation, but the chat jumps every now and then, and I can't control it because I was so far behind it. And Mike, by the way, people that have chromosomal, I want to talk, I know you weren't addressing this to me, but I do want to say this real quick. I've said this before. People that have chromosomal problems like XXY biology, or if their chromosomes simply do not match their physical gender, that is an extraordinarily rare circumstance. Does it happen? Yes. That is an extraordinarily rare circumstance. And again, you cannot use that as the norm. If you're using that as the norm, that is a fallacious argument at best. And what you're doing is you're taking the exception and trying to say that that is the norm. Mr. Miles says, didn't Jesus have long hair? Actually, Jesus' hair length was never described in the Bible. The Jesus having long hair comes more from Leonardo da Vinci than Scripture. And of course, Bird of Prey thinks Jesus was bald. Exactly. Some species females do dominate, but generally speaking, that's not the case. Really, generally speaking, you would say that's not the case? I beg to differ. I mean, so you know every single species, and I know, and the problem is, Miles, is that you can always. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and argue about every species on the planet. All right, if you want to talk about sexism, well, first of all, nobody considers it sexist that the male lion lies around while the female goes and hunts, right? Because that's just them doing what their instincts tell them to do. They don't have the intellectual capability of being sexist. Only humans do. You know, the lions don't sit there and think, well, gosh, that's not fair. No, they're just, you know, their instincts tell them to go hunt, and they go hunt. Anyway. So, time to wrap it up. Multi-Gunman says, how's it going? I'm hanging in there, Multi-Gunman, trying to, you know, trying to deal with the leg, trying to deal with a lot of stuff, but yeah. Dan says, do you like Deep Space Nine Season 6, The Reckoning? I don't remember that episode by name, so I'm not sure which one you're talking about. Nobody knows how Jesus really looked anyway. It's later artists that made him white and with blue eyes. Oh yeah, Jesus more than likely looked what we would, closer to what we would describe as Arabic by today's standards. So yeah, as far as what Jesus looked like, yeah, people that try to say, oh, he looked like this, and then they try to say, oh, but you know, he was this and this. We don't know what he looked like. Get over it. Doesn't matter. He's missing my entire point. I might as well argue with my wall. I'm not missing your point, Miles. I'm simply disagreeing with you. Nature is not sexist. You're inserting sexism into something that is not sexist. That's like saying the rock is sexist because it's bigger than the other rock. Because one rock you designate male and the other rock you designate female. We know that Samson had long hair, but then that was his Nazirite vow, and it was many years earlier than the long hair rule. Yeah, that's true. Sci-Fi says Rational Roundtable, aka Anti-Trucker, great stream as always. Love Long and Alpaca. All hail Kuroga. And Bird of Prey as our dear leader, God, Emperor, yeah, whatever. And still missing. How am I missing your point, Miles? I'm saying that you are just all over the map with this. If you want to zero in and say, this is how nature is sexist, tell me. I've asked you several times. Tell me exactly how nature is sexist. If you want to say it's because males dominate females, then I say only in certain ways. And you know what? That's not nature being sexist. That's those males being sexist if they're actually abusing women or whatever. That's not nature being sexist. That's the individual being sexist. As for the behaviors of animals in nature that simply do whatever their instincts tell them to do, that's not sexist either, because just because the female lion goes out and hunts and the male lion lies around with the kids doesn't mean one is superior to the other. It just means that they're both doing their freaking jobs. And the problem is people keep, and this is the big problem in our society, in human society, is that we keep thinking that, oh my God, if the man goes out and work and the woman stays home with the kids, that's oppressing the woman and it's so horrible and it's sexist because they're doing what they naturally would do. Bird wants to know how many colors were in Joseph's coat. It says many. When I hear Kuroga, I always think of corrosion. Well, that's a good way to describe Kuroga. Do you know the phrase survival of the fittest? Sexist. How is survival of the fittest sexist, Miles? That doesn't even make sense. Because survival of the fittest applies to male and female. And by the way, it's not survival of the fittest. And you know that. Survival of the fittest is one of the most misused statements in evolutionary biology. It's survival of those things that increase the likelihood of reproduction. Period. Which means, for example, a woman who is physically attractive to men is more likely to reproduce than a female who is not. Is that sexist? My dad is having a knee replacement in a couple of weeks and he's 84. Please pray for him. Absolutely, Piano Dean. I tell you, as someone who's been going through it these last few months, I feel for him. Bio Mike says, just answer me this. What bathroom should my friend use? He's biologically both male and female, but identifies as a woman, but still has a penis. Well, I don't know. You know what, Vile? But again, you're trying, you can't use the most extreme, bizarre, oddball circumstance to try and say that that's the norm, because that's not the norm. How many people are biologically both male and female? Not very many. And how many of those people are not surgically altered to become one or the other? Not very many. Which means your person is a minority within a minority. And a very tiny minority within an extremely tiny minority. So don't ask me that question, because that's like there's one person in your whole state dealing with that situation. So I don't know, write your governor. But you know what? I'm sorry. If my daughter's in the bathroom and some other woman walks in and whips out a dick, I'm going to beat the crap out of that person. Do you like, and you know what? Call me sexist, call me whatever. Don't care. But here's the thing about trans and all that, is that 99% of the time, a trans person who is a genuine trans, you would never know that they were not whatever gender they identify as. And so if they go to the women's room and they use the stall and all that, nobody ever knows, nobody ever cares. All right. The only reason it's a big deal these days is because certain people want to run around and proudly say, I have a dick and I want to use the ladies' room. You know what? No. Sorry, no. If you want to proclaim the fact that you have a dick and you want to use the ladies' room, the answer is no. However, if you are a transgender and therefore you identify as a woman, you're not going to be running around telling everybody you have a dick, number one, and you're just going to quietly go in and use the ladies' room and whatever. I don't care. All right? But don't give me this crap about how you should be able to proclaim. I don't want to know everybody's sexuality. You know what really pisses me off about the whole gay agenda is that why the hell is there a gay agenda? I don't care who you have sex with. I really could not care less. If you are gay, straight, bi, whatever, I do not give a crap. That is not my business. And so don't tell me about your sexuality and then tell me how horrible I am for not I don't know what, celebrating your sexuality? I don't care about your sexuality. I'm not celebrating your sexuality, but you know what? I'm not celebrating anybody else's sexuality either. I don't care. That's my opinion on it. Do you like how they deal with a good and evil in DS9 The Reckoning? A prophet in the form of Kira and an evil one in the form of Jake are forced to fight when the reckoning begins. I vaguely remember that now that you described the plot a little bit. But I'd have to rewatch it to really honestly get into that one because I haven't seen that episode in a long time. And thank you. Trek95 agrees, says survival of the fittest applies to males and females. Yeah, I don't understand how that is sexist. That doesn't even make sense. Survival of the fittest doesn't even mention gender. That's not sexist. You can't possibly be sexist if you're not talking about gender. And let's see. Alexander says, live and let live. Well, overall, I agree. Vile Mike says, approximately 1 in 10,000 have some sort of sexual dysmorphism, as a higher number in the USA than there are Jews. Okay. Sexual dysmorphism is not the same thing as, and maybe you think it is, but I'm sorry, but it's not a huge percentage of the population that is running around with messed up chromosomes or is a hermaphrodite. Okay, if you think that there's all these hermaphrodites running around having these problems, guess what? If that were the case, why aren't we hearing about it? Why aren't we seeing it? Why? Because it's not that many people. And 1 out of every 10,000, by the way, not a lot of people. Now, does it suck to be one of those people? Probably. I feel for those people. And I don't know. I'm not an expert on that kind of thing. That's not my area of expertise, Vile Mike. I don't know how you deal with that kind of thing. That's something that I fortunately never had to deal with. And I truly feel for those people. But don't try to tell me that I have to say that chicks with dicks is the norm because 1 out of every 10,000 people has some sort of sexual dimorphism. Because you know what? Some sort of doesn't mean what you're saying. That doesn't mean 1 out of every 10,000 people is a person with both sets of genitalia and messed up chromosomes, right? That's not what you're saying. Some sort of sexual dimorphism could mean someone who is a freaking transvestite. So don't give me that crap. Tell me what what the actual hard numbers are. Well, fine, but I still don't have a strong opinion about it. But I don't, you know what? If you want to run around and parade around your sexuality, I have very little respect for you. I don't run around parading my, do you know what I do not do? I don't run around telling everybody that I meet that I have sex with women. I know, shocking, right? I don't do that. Bird says I'm going to beat up women. Probably not. Don't let it get you. Relax. Let it flow. Oh, that's all right. You know me. I like to go on rants every now and then. That's all. Let's see. Sodium is bad for the heart. Okay. Because salt. Yeah, got it. Huh. Sexuality matters today because it all comes down to votes. You know what? You're 100% right. That's the only reason it matters is because it's a political freaking agenda. And your sexuality is not damn politics. All right? Who you have sex with is your business. And that's a personal thing. And you know what? And people have very deep held beliefs as far as sexuality and what is appropriate and what isn't. That's to each individual to deal with. It is not something that I want to know about for every person I talk to. I don't care who you have sex with. I don't care what gender you prefer. I don't care what race you prefer sexually, because yes, people have preferences as far as they think Asian women are prettier than, say, white women, or that black women are prettier than Middle Eastern women, or whatever. People have their preferences as far as what looks good and what gender they may find more sexually compatible, etc. I don't care. Not my business. And quite frankly, when people say that's between you and God, that is a 100% accurate statement. Stormer says, until it's snipped, no access to the ladies. It's not about the feelings, about preventing predators from using loopholes. Exactly. I agree with you on that. But here's the thing. And that's why I said, you know, most people who are true transsexuals, all right? I'm not talking about, you know, some predator, like you said, that's just trying to use a loophole. Someone who's a true transsexual, most of them honestly living quiet lives, passing as whatever gender they identify is. And you know what? If some a male who believes he's female and going into the female restroom and using the stall and all that and doing their business, and nobody ever knows and nobody ever cares. And quite frankly, that, you know, and it's funny because I know people say, oh, don't ask, don't tell. That's wrong. No, actually, in this case, it's not wrong because I don't want to know your sexual preferences. But if you're going to advertise to me what your genitalia is, then yes, you go to the room that matches that set. End of discussion. All right, so I really do need to wrap it up. Alexander says, how's your knee? It hurts. Val says, maybe it's also considered improper to discuss such things to some people. Also, sexual dimorphism just means that they do not fit entirely into one biologically defined sexes. Yeah, which means if you're saying 1 out of every 10,000 fits that, that's a lot of different conditions that covers, which means it's an extremely tiny amount of people that are fitting into what you specifically argued about. And that is exactly what I said before. You're using the most out there exception to try and define how things should be for everybody. That is wrong, okay? Just because 1 out of every 10,000 people has some form of sexual dimorphism, or however you pronounce that, and then out of those, say 1 out of every 500 is actually a confirmed hermaphrodite, right? So let's say that's, I'm just pulling numbers out of the air, but let's say that's the number. That does not mean that we need to adjust our restroom policy for hermaphrodites. This is like your burner channel. Let it out, man. Let it out. Some people think Lady Gaga may have a penis due to her analyzing some of her videos. If she does and doesn't want to say it, it's up to her. I don't care if Lady Gaga has a penis. You know what? I'm never going to have... I can pretty safely say that I am never going to have sex with Lady Gaga. Therefore, whether she has a penis is irrelevant to me. So there you go. Mr. Ron says, that's between you and gay. That's 100% accurate. I don't know 100% that God exists. Well, I understand that. But, you know, when I say that, what I mean is as far as the morality of different sexual practices and all that, that's not on me. All right. You know, don't ask me if it's okay for you to be, to be gay. Don't ask me if it's okay for you to be trans. Don't ask me if it's okay for you to get sexual reassignment surgery. Don't ask me what to do if you're a hermaphrodite. I don't know. But you know what? If you are a believer, that is between you and God. If you are not a believer, then do whatever the hell you want to do, right? That's the whole satanic church ritual, and that's what the world believes right now. Do what you want to do. If that's the way you want to live, if you want to live like a Satanist, you go right ahead. And I'm not saying that to imply a derogatory thing. I'm saying that to be technically accurate. That is the satanic philosophy. Do as you will. There is a coexist sign on the shelf, yet so much salt. Ah, funny you should mention that. I got that because... Now, you got to you see, I hate you because I got to move and my leg hurts. Ah. Check, this is the most awesome coexist ever. Death Star, The One Ring, Alien Embryo, X-Files, TARDIS, The Flash, and a phaser. I love it. That's why I got it, not because I believe... In fact, I think the coexist philosophy is a flawed one, but that's a whole other discussion. I have at home 3 toilets, gender neutral, need to clean all of them. Well, you know, home is a little different than public. You know that. Let's see. And it all started so nicely, this stream, talking about Star Trek and good old series. Hey, you know what? Well, when we get on the Rational Roundtable channel, we'll argue about stuff, and that's cool. And the thing is, and this is how I think that it's important that we can discuss these things and voice our genuine opinions. And yes, I get boisterous and passionate sometimes. Yes, I go on rants at times. But you guys know, at least I hope you do, and if you don't, well, you should, that I love you guys. I absolutely do. And while we may disagree on some of these topics, and on some of them we may disagree passionately, but that doesn't change the fact that I love you. And when I say that, I don't mean that in some nebulous religious way. I mean that you guys are important to me. You guys have made a huge difference in my life, and I appreciate each and every one of you having the impact on my life that you've had. That being said, I also love arguing. And so when I do this, I'm having fun. Don't think that I'm genuinely pissed off at anybody, because I'm not. Some creatures can be a sexual fertilizer of their own egg. That's true, but that's a whole different. Like, is that sexist? I guess. That's Mr. Miles. It gets better. The knee. Well, the knee still has a ways to go. I actually have some potential problems with it. Some possible nerve damage to the knee from the surgery, and if so, that could be bad news. And I'm hoping that that's not the case. Darren's going to get pedantic about the flash lightning bolt symbol not being accurate. Hey, you know what? They tried. It says it's the flash. I know it's not perfectly accurate, but you know what? I don't care. Sci-Fi says that's actually pretty cool. Yeah, I like it. That's the thing. I love that coexist, because from a distance, it just looks like one of those coexist stickers, and then you look at it and you realize, oh, crap. Neat. Tuned in to see a sci-fi coexist sticker. And when did Miles get a wrench? Glad to see it. Well, only on this channel. Let's see. Alexander says, I love Rice Krispies. Well, Rice Krispies are edible. Gets excited and boisterous. No way. I know. Me never. Rational Alto, there's a profession for that, attorney. You know what? Had my life been a little different, I'd probably be an attorney. I would love to be. You think that's Flash Gordon instead of D-Flash? Let me see. You might be right, but it doesn't list it on this. I thought it said the Flash, but maybe you're right. Maybe it's supposed to be Flash Gordon. Anyway, what was I going to say? But yeah, as far as Sci-Fi Nation, honestly, had my life been a little bit different, maybe if I wasn't dyslexic and I did well in school or something like that, attorney would have been a great career for me. Because I've learned many lessons about Christ from watching Doctor Who. Well, I can't say that I have. Darren says, sorry about the flash symbol thing, but that's just my inner crabby old man. That's cool. Piano Dean says, I'd never taken a painkiller. How do they make you feel? Depends on the individual painkiller. I will tell you, I have a fairly high tolerance for medications, which is a problem. And so things like Tylenol, ibuprofen, stuff like that, I don't feel a thing. Meaning that it doesn't reduce the pain, it doesn't make me feel good or anything like that. When you take something like Percocet or oxycodone, if I take 2 of those, it's a different sensation than, say, if you drink alcohol, but it does have kind of a similar type of pleasant feeling to it, and that's why it's considered a narcotic. But it also very much reduces the pain and is quite effective. The problem is that, of course, doctors are paranoid about prescribing that kind of stuff. Aberjam says, bring back the hat. I may have to do that. I'm going to have to dig it out. It's sitting on a shelf over there. Shover says, I always believe debate should be like a sporting event. Once the whistle blows, go for the jugular, but shake hands and no hard feelings once the debate ends. I agree with you. I absolutely agree. I love fighting with people tooth and nail, but, and in fact, I'll tell you, my wife's, it's kind of complicated. My wife's sister's father, not technically my father-in-law because he's divorced from my now deceased mother-in-law, and he's, but my wife's sister's father, his name is Bill. Bill is a great guy. He's in his 70s now, but far left liberal. I mean, we're talking, he was part of like some of the more radical movements in the 60s, and that he was actually being investigated by the federal government because of some possible implications with certain government facilities being damaged in certain ways that I will not mention here. But he is as far left as they get, and he and I would fight for hours and hours and hours over politics, right? Because I'm definitely not far left, and we would fight, and you know what? I love him to death. He loves me, and it's okay, you know. But the problem is, but then you have people like my sister, My sister has not talked to me in a couple of years, in large part because I am not because I'm a conservative, because I'm really not. I'm more a classical liberal, but whatever. But she's not because I'm a conservative, but because I disagreed with her about some liberal policies. And so all of a sudden, I'm just the worst person ever, and she won't talk to me. And people that are that close-minded, wow, what's wrong? I don't understand how you can hate someone like that, especially someone that is your family. It saddens me. I reach out to her every now and then, but she won't talk to me. I'd love to have a relationship with my sister, but she's not interested because I'm a Christian, and she finds that offensive, and she thinks she makes all these crazy assumptions about what I believe, which I understand a lot of non-believers make crazy assumptions about what believers believe, but it's sad. I, on the other hand, love a good spirited argument and will argue until the cows come home. But, Mr. Miles and I have had some knockdown, drag out fights via Skype, and yet we're still friends. Wow, amazing. Speaking of Mr. Miles, he says, men don't get unlimited orgasms. Sexist. Well, I'll agree with you on that one. That is unfair. What about Doctor Who's gender? What about Doctor Who's gender? You're a Tellarite. You love arguing. Actually, it's funny because if you look, it's the funny thing about the Tellarites, because I just watched the Enterprise 3-parter with the drone ship as part of research for dismantling Darren's arguments about the Romulans, and the Tellarites are funny because in the original series, the Tellarite obviously had a big problem with the Vulcans, and Sarek said Tellarites don't argue for a reason; they simply argue, and they took that one line and turn that into their entire species, to where they literally live to argue, to where Archer had to learn how to properly say your mama jokes in order to earn the respect of the Tellarite ambassador. I think that's stupid, but it's funny. Let's see. Being a Christian is offensive. Yeesh. Well, there are people that believe that. There are people that will instantly say, like, for example, oh, you're a Christian. Oh, so you don't think women should be able to vote. Oh, you don't think women should be allowed to work. What? Read freaking Proverbs 31. I'm sorry, anybody that thinks that the freaking Christians are automatically sexist, please read Proverbs 31. I have a super high tolerance to pain meds as well. When I had surgery and was in post-op recovery room, the doctor couldn't believe after the amount he gave me, I was still awake. Yeah. And I'll tell you, certain drugs have no effect on me whatsoever, like morphine. Morphine does absolutely nothing to me. In fact, when I was in the hospital for appendicitis, they shot me up with a bunch of morphine, and I was like, could you please give me something for the pain? And they were like, we just shot you up with morphine. I said, please give me something for the pain. It still hurt, and they were completely shocked. They gave me something else that worked, but yeah, that sucks. Then said person has quite a few interesting meetings. Let's see. Being a Christian is let's see. Then said person has a few quite interesting meetings in life. Yes. Not sure about painkillers. I did go to the dentist, and since I hate those local painkillers there, I got some serious drilling without... I can't go... I think Sarek meant that as an insult, since arguing is a core part of their society. But the problem is that was not established at that point, and you don't have, for example, the Tellarites don't show up and just pick a fight with everybody. In fact, because in Journey to Babel, notice the Tellarites are just like sitting there hanging out with all the other delegates. They're having a perfectly nice time at the party, but then they have a strong disagreement with the Vulcans, and that's when I think Sarek meant it as an insult just to get under his skin. But yeah, I thought Enterprise Tellarites are funny when the ambassador called the NX-1 small and unimpressive, and Archer said the same about him. I did like that line. That was a good line. But my point on that, though, is that the Tellarite society based on argumentation is taken from one line out of context from another show, and I think that was a mistake. The Tellarites should be a little deeper than they just fight because that's their whole society. That doesn't make any kind of sense. They didn't do that with the Andorians. They expanded on the Andorians in an interesting way with Commander Shran. And, like in the original series, the only thing you could have taken from the ambassador's statements, he said that we are a violent people. And so they could have just made Commander Shran just constantly enraged and trying to fight, which that is Commander Shran is more aggressive and believes in, like, for example, the death ritual and stuff like that they had in that same episode over the Tellarite thing. But they also expand, like when he talks about, one thing I loved, one of my favorite lines of Shran, and it was from that same, the third part of that episode, was when he said, the Vulcans believe that the desert makes you strong, but it's the ice that makes real, I can't remember exactly how it is, but, because they're an ice-dwelling people. And I thought that Shran was really interesting. The Tellarites, they made two-dimensional. The exchanges between Archer and the Tellarite ambassador were hilarious. They were fun, but like I said, they were a little cheap. Yeah, I think it has to do with the metabolic differences because morphine doesn't really work on me either. Yeah, for some people it doesn't. I agree the Tellarites would have gotten that far if a society that argued... Yeah, the Tellarites would have collapsed as a society if that was really the centerpiece of their society was argumentation. Do you like it when they base something new in Star Trek on one line said before in Trek? No, that's the problem. A society whose sole purpose is to fight. You don't think that could happen? LOL, haven't you been paying attention to the SJWs? Okay. Now, well, there's a difference between your sole purpose is to fight and your sole purpose is to push an agenda. The SJWs have a very specific agenda that they want to push. I don't agree with that agenda, but that's their thing. However, the Tellarites will fight over anything. That's the problem. The Tellarites, as Sarek said, they don't fight for a reason, they just fight. That is their sole purpose for existing, is to fight. And to me, that cheapens it, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense. And let's see. Sorry, why is that there? All right, so I'll turn that up. Not the cooling. We need to turn. What the heck? Oh, that's in the wrong mode. No wonder. Okay. Turn that up a little bit. All right. Let's see. Shran, it's the ice that forges real strength. Thank you. Yes, I love that line. I love that line from Shran. And Shran was a developed character. Not quite to the level of Gul Dukat, but I really, by the end of Enterprise's run, Shran was actually, I really liked his character. I wish that they had a Tellarite that they could have done that with, that you could have gotten a little deeper into, instead of just argue, your mama jokes, and so that's my problem with the Tellarites. In the Enterprise episode where you first see the Andorians, it's mentioned they don't have transporter technology, but in season 4 they do, and it works better than Enterprise's. Well, maybe they stole it. I don't know. I'd have to go back and rewatch. Maybe they stole it, or you never know. Anyway, guys, I am going to wrap it up because I've got to get off my leg for a little bit, and then I need to help Mr. Miles and Chris with the problems they're having with... Who the heck is that? That ain't my church. Must have autoplayed to something else. So it was a lot of fun. I like hanging out with you guys. Hopefully this channel won't be destroyed by YouTube. And yeah. So with that, guys, take care, have a good one, and don't let the bed bugs bite.
Let me play among the stars. Let me see what
Thomas,
spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words, baby, I love you. You son of a bitch, anti-tracker! You take that back! You take that back right now! He said that Frank Sinatra and Freddie Mercury were man-on-man lovers. It's not true, Mr. Miles! You're all liars! You're all liars, you sons of bitches!